Everybody. We are apparently live right now. I would like to call the meeting to order. It is Thursday, September 1st, 2022. We're meeting in room 320 of the Multi-Service Center. This meeting is being broadcast live and recorded by WCTV, audio recorded by Jamie Wixton, who is also the creator of the minutes for the meeting. Would you please stand for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you and welcome everybody. We are starting our meeting tonight as noted on our agenda with a workshop of approximately an hour where we're going to look at the superintendent evaluation and also hopefully discuss some protocols for our committee. So I'm going to turn the floor over to Dorothy Presser and welcome her back, and thank you, Dorothy.
Well, thanks very much. Happy to be here. So we'll dive right in. So the first part of tonight is my talking about the evaluation process for the superintendent. As you know, the evaluation process for all educators changed a number of years ago with the achievement gap legislation. So now there are regulations and certain requirements around evaluation for all educators, including superintendents. Part of the rationale, or much of the rationale for the change in, or the instigation of the new regulations, was to make sure that educator evaluation was more tied to student achievement. And that it was actually became something of a tool or a strategy for helping educators improve their practice. So not only, were they doing a good job, but how could they continue to develop their practice, maybe to work into a leadership role or something along those lines. But how, we talk about continuous improvement for students, so this is continuous improvement for educators throughout their career. And it also links multiple criteria to measuring educator success more than many tools that were used in the past. And there are certain elements that the department requires. There are certain elements that are optional, and we'll talk about all of those as we go through. So some of the things, if you're not familiar with superintendent evaluation, so if you're new to the committee or haven't delved into this before, some of the things we need to know are that it requires more attention to the evaluation process than many tools that were used in the past. And one of the things that I'll emphasize as I go through this is the more attention that you pay at the beginning of the process, the easier it will be the rest of the way through. So keep that in mind. It's not something to just think about a little now and then forget until the end. Pay good attention now, and it will be way easier as you go all the way through the rest of the process. There are components that may be new to school committees, or certainly new and different to members who may be coming on a school committee and are, are accustomed to an evaluation process in another part of their life or their role, their work role. Annual evaluations are often required, just like teachers. Once a superintendent has been in the position for 3 years, you can move to a 2-year evaluation process, totally at local option. But it is available to you, and basically you take the cycle that I'm going to talk about and you stretch it over 2 years instead of 1 year. And then there's a standard format that you have to use, and there with some ability to adapt things to district needs and some things that are optional. So there's 3 key components to the evaluation model, and I'll go through each of those 3 components, and then I'll talk about how it works as you're implementing the evaluation. The first component is a 5-step cycle, the second is a 2-part tool, and the third is the multi-part rating system. So we'll start with the 5-step cycle. The cycle starts and ends with a self-assessment. So hard to do a self-assessment when you're just starting, right? But often when a superintendent is just starting in a district, it's sort of an assessment of where the superintendent sees things now in terms of where the work needs to be done or the district needs to move in that first year. Once a superintendent is in that cycle, the self-assessment, the reason I say it starts and ends is the self-assessment is part of the final evaluation, but it's also where you're sort of starting for what are the goals that we're going to set in the upcoming cycle, because it's where are we and where do we need to move to. So that self-assessment will be part of setting the goals. Once you have that, the goals are set and the plan is developed. That happens jointly with the superintendent and the school committee. Then obviously, the goals start to get implemented. In the middle of the cycle, there's a mid-cycle review. The mid-cycle review is not a written evaluation. It's really a sort of a step back and a chance to say, how are we doing? Where are we? Do we need to adjust anything based on circumstances? In an ideal world, you're talking about the evaluation and the goals far more than when they're set, the mid-cycle review in the end. You're really getting updates as you go along all throughout the year in the presentations you're seeing at school committee meetings. And that helps you build the knowledge of the evidence as it's being built, so that when you get to the end, to that final evaluation, you're really sort of reviewing what you've learned all year as opposed to sort of getting a data dump. Jeff?
So just to be clear, because I don't think we've done this in the years that I've been on the school committee. You're actually talking about modifying, maybe even eliminating, theoretically, the goals and the plan for the year during the mid-cycle review?
It doesn't happen often, but it's a possibility, right? So take, for example, a goal that depended on a grant. The grant didn't come. You're not going to be able to accomplish what you wanted in that goal without that resource. So how do you modify the plan to be for what reasonably can be accomplished during that evaluation cycle?
Okay.
Pandemic, right, is a good example of, the goals that superintendents were working on up until March kind of came to a crashing halt when school closed and the priorities changed.
Okay, and obviously that's by mutual consent.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Okay.
yes. Yes, it's not the superintendent coming to say, hey, I changed the goals because I'm not making progress. It's by mutual consent, yes, if it happens. So that's the 5-step cycle. Then we have the 2-part tool. The first part of the tool is SMART goals. You're most likely familiar with the acronym SMART. Specific, strategic, measurable, action-oriented, rigorous, realistic, and results-focused, and timed and tracked. SMART goals also have key actions and benchmarks, so you know what's going to happen. Yeah, that's okay. So you know what is supposed to happen as the goals are implemented and approximately when. There are goals that are expected in 3 areas: a professional practice goal, a student learning goal, and a district improvement goal. There may be times when you can't tell the difference between whether something is a student learning goal or a district improvement goal, which is perfectly fine. But sometimes a district improvement goal might be related to a building project or something along those lines. So if you think about the 2-part tool, right? The first part is the goals, the second part of the standards. The goals are always specific to the district. The goals are what's going to move Wareham forward as they get implemented. The standards are the same for all superintendents throughout the state. And there are standards in 4 areas: instructional leadership, management and operations, family and community engagement, and professional culture. So the standards are often referred to as the rubric, and the rubric has a particular structure to it. First of all, you have the 4 standards. The standards are further broken down into indicators, and the indicators are further broken down into descriptors. Now, for those of you who have been around a while, you might be thinking, wait, there's something missing. The elements. A couple of years ago, the rubric for the superintendent changed and took out, there was a model rubric for a couple of years, and now this is the standard rubric, took out those elements. Part of the rationale for that was because this is a lot of heads, multiple people doing one evaluation. it was easier for everyone to understand without the elements. Some of those elements were so detailed that they were actually information that you as school committee members did not have access to be able to evaluate. So it didn't make sense to have them in. And it's also the fact that it's a public process. It's easier for the public to sort of understand at a higher level, and it keeps you more at the governance level than down into the management level, which is what a lot of the elements brought you down to. And it eliminates a lot, right? It brought things down from like 60 plus down to a total of about 40, I think, or 20. So just as an example of the rubric, we talked about one of the standards being instructional leadership. So part of instructional leadership is curriculum. Part of having a solid curriculum is having the standard-based units that can be delivered with integrity. And so the descriptors are, what does this look like at an unsatisfactory, needs improvement, proficient, or exemplary level? So you actually, instead of a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and let me guess where it lands, or 1, 2, 3, 4, and let me guess where it lands, you have a description to help you figure that out. You will always see proficient in bold, or almost all the language in proficient in bold, because that's actually the language from regulation. And you will almost always see in exemplary the phrase models this practice for others. Because exemplary is really intended to be at a level that is an exemplar for other people, superintendents either statewide or regionally in the work that they're doing. Making sense to everybody so far?
The concept of modeling,
Yeah.
does it go so far as to say, if a superintendent is literally going to conferences and speaking on this subject, as that's an example of being an exemplar? Because it's not that easy to be an exemplar if no one's observing you other than your own district.
Well, there are times when districts have practices where other districts come and visit, right?
Yes?
Which, yeah. What's going on, you know, you have, I assume, some sort of a superintendent roundtable in the area, and, you know, superintendents share, like, what's going on, and mentor other superintendents.
Proficient is a really good score,
Yes,
and it's hard to be exemplary.
yes, yes, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And when this first came out, part of what when the whole model came out, not just for superintendents, part of what the department was trying to emphasize is everybody can't be exemplary, right? Everybody doesn't get a trophy for participation, right? So everybody, you shouldn't be just slapping exemplary on everyone. It's work to get there. And so there were some superintendents who said, don't rate me as exemplary because I need to model for my staff that not everybody's exemplary.
But
Right.
then that's an example of exemplar.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, so questions on the ratings? Yes.
I just have one question, and please tell me if this is going to come up later and you're going to answer it, but when a superintendent sets goals, they can also set which,
That'll come up later.
they will, okay.
Okay.
All right,
Yes.
thank you.
So you have the 5-step cycle, the 2-part tool, and then the rating system. At the end of the cycle, you'll give a summative performance rating on the goals, which goes from did not meet up to exceeded, a summative performance rating on the standards, as we said, from unsatisfactory up to exemplary, and an overall summative rating that combines the two, which goes from unsatisfactory up to exemplary. So then we get to, we've talked about the 3 components then, 5-step cycle, 2-part tool, multi-part rating system. So how does it all work when you actually go to implement it? At the beginning of the cycle, you're going to create the evaluation document, which is, I'm sure, the point you're at now, right? You're going to work with the superintendent to draft goals. I think in every case, the superintendent will come to the school committee with some recommended goals, from which, once the superintendent has been in the district, those goals are usually new iterations of what happened before, right? They're not unless you complete something like, okay, the building project is done now, you're always, you have that like plan, that overarching goals that look out, right? So you're constantly, what is the next step? So a lot of times the goals will be sort of iterations of what came before. Some committees use, especially larger committees will use a subcommittee to start the work, sort of, what don't you want to see made, laws, sausages, and editing goals. So, and others may work with the full committee. A smaller committee may work just with the full committee, working with the superintendent. But no matter how you get there, the school committee has final approval on what the goals are. The school committee votes to say, yes, these are the goals that we're moving forward with in the evaluation model, or the evaluation cycle. Once you've set the goals, and I said before, the goals are what drives Wareham forward. So think of this as a goal-centered evaluation model. Goals come first. Then take out that rubric and identify the standards and indicators that will be evaluated. You do not need to, and we'd recommend that you don't, evaluate on every single indicator. The department talks about focus indicators that you pick related to the goals. So once you've set those goals, then go into the rubric and jointly decide on what are the focus indicators that most relate to the goals. So that way, you're focusing the work, and also the superintendent is able to give you one body of evidence that will suffice for both the goals and the indicators, rather than, two sets of evidence that are needed for a whole separate set. I'm not saying that very well, but I think you understand. The trick there is that all the standards need to be evaluated. So as you're picking your limited number, and we usually say 6 to 8, probably maybe 1 or 2 per goal. One of the other things that you want to think about with those goals is not too many. A reasonable number of goals, there's generally 3 or 4 goals that superintendents will have in the evaluation. So all the standards need to be evaluated. So as you're picking those different indicators, you just need to make sure that you have at least one from each standard. Make sense? Okay.
The goals are very separate from the standards. I get that. But in my mind, it's also a dividing line between these are specific, perhaps even project-related things, not necessarily projects, but...
Not necessarily.
But they could be projects. The standards relate to the general operations of the district, right?
Yep.
It would seem to me that, and I haven't tried to do this before, that eliminating indicators might be more difficult than you make it sound, simply because general operations is very broad, and my guess is those indicators are all relevant.
But some are going to be more relevant than others.
So what's the goal in eliminating indicators?
To focus the work. That's why they're called the focused indicators, right?
But by definition, the superintendent is responsible
Well,
for
yes,
everything.
right. So, and sometimes committees will say, well, what happens if something comes up during the course of the year? Well, you deal with it, right? Even if it's not a goal or not an indicator, an issue comes up, you address the issue. And it may turn out that in the next evaluation cycle, that becomes part of a goal in the indicators you're looking at.
We did this as a building principal, we did with our teachers. We negotiated with the union, a group of focus indicators. Same thing, teachers have a wide variety of things, but it did give you some targeted focus areas. And then you said, like, the next year or 2 years, you could then come up with more indicators so that you're constantly looking at your craft going forward.
Right.
And it just made it more focused from an evaluation point of view. That's,
I completely understand, but it does seem to me that the lower you get in the org chart, the more easily you can eliminate indicators. When you've got somebody responsible for everything, indicators may be more difficult to eliminate. That's all I'm saying.
no, I agree. Except if they're supposed to provide evidence for all the indicators, like, I just think would get better evidence for fewer indicators than we would for all indicators. It's hard.
I think, in my history of working with the superintendent rubric, that many of the indicators are created by other leaders within the district. And so if you took that and you focus the indicators specifically to what the superintendent does, right, in their position, what they're responsible for and what they do. Of course, they're leading their team, and they're also helping their team and providing the support that's needed to get all those other indicators done. But there are many that cross and move and shake. They end up in a lot of other places. So in my estimation, you could easily eliminate indicators within the structures of that evaluation. And knowing that with a good, solid team, those other pieces of evidence can happen.
So my response would be, I'm going to hold the superintendent responsible for every member of the performance of every member of his leadership team.
Right.
So you, for example, may have a subset of the indicators, okay? But they're still relevant to the performance of the superintendent.
But his specific area of expertise may be what you'd be more interested in evaluating for that purpose. Because you can get all of that other information, just ask, and you'll have it. You know it's getting done. So the focus really should be on the job and the strengths and the skills and what the superintendent sees needs to be amended or worked on or fixed.
So, but let's say, for example, like you mentioned tying into goals as well.
Yeah.
Let's say hypothetically a goal was to keep Wareham students in Wareham, just hypothetically. If that were the case, you'd look for indicators in like community relations that would help focus towards that goal, but also towards that individual part of the rubric.
Correct.
That standard,
Correct.
potentially.
Correct. You might have something, so you might have significant work to do on the budget, and that's going to fall somewhere under management and operations. You might have significant work to do on developing curriculum in certain areas. That's going to work on instruction. You might be looking at a goal around hiring or something that would fall under professional culture. So I think without knowing what the goals are, it's hard to say it would be easy. I have found that when I see the goals and I see the indicators that superintendents and school committees work on, they are able to limit it to not all of them successfully and feel like it was a solid evaluation.
Can a committee not comment on another indicator or aspect of the job if it's not?
It would not be appropriate to do that.
That's the problem. Right, that's, well, okay.
Yep. I mean, in fairness to the superintendent, right, in fairness to the person being evaluated, you have said to them, this is what we're going to evaluate you on. So then that's where I say if something comes up, right, you deal with it, right, even if it's not in the evaluation model. And it might become part of, say, okay, this was an issue, it really needs more work, we're going to make sure it's in the next cycle.
You can go ahead, Jeff.
So are you saying that part of the mid-cycle review could be adding or subtracting an indicator?
It could be, if it needed to happen, yep.
So each of the goals that we agree upon at the beginning of the cycle are very specific to their subsections, whether it's the professional practice, student learning, district improvement.
No, you said each of their goals, and then you were talking about the standards.
Okay,
So-
so that's what I'm just trying to clarify.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
each goal would then be broken down to those 3 parts per one goal?
No. So don't even think about the standards while you're setting the goals. Don't even think about them.
I'm
Yep.
saying the goals are set,
Yep,
right?
yep.
The whole committee and the superintendent said, these are the goals for that year.
Yep.
So that's already like hypothetically decided.
Yep,
When you're then going through and evaluating what those goals were, you're looking at, it's a very specific goal most of the time. They're usually not super vague, right? And we're supposed to be given, you know, the evidences to back up, or the rubrics, or the data to back up
Yep, the evidence,
everything.
yep,
So like when we look at things and you had the four,
standards,
no, not even just the four standards, but like the levels, you
Yep.
have the unsatisfactory or needs improvement,
Yep.
proficient, and exemplary. You said exemplary is like just
on a pedestal.
up on a pedestal,
Yep.
right? So the way I have always viewed it is that proficient, to me, means you're doing the job you were hired to do, and that your work, those goals are aligning with what that is. So I just, you know, but anything that's less than that, if that particular goal isn't being met based on what was provided at that time, that's not, you know, like a super, because to me, like, proficient's just like plain, like toast with butter on it, you know what I mean? And then it's like, needs improvement is just toast, and then the other one is like avocado toast, you know, you have like the different levels of things, but I just get confused because it seems like I don't recall ever having a mid-cycle review where we were able to, like, or under the impression we could discuss or redirect or say, based on this, we don't see that we see that this is where we see you right now, and this is where, so that you have that time to work through that.
Yep,
So you're saying that that's what that should have been?
right,
Okay.
right.
Well, remember, we've had unusual evaluation cycles for the last few years.
Yes, we have.
So that's
Yeah.
why, yeah.
Right, so the mid-cycle evaluation gives you a chance to say, hey, we really expected more out of this, or wow, you're really, you know, this, we expected toast with butter and we're getting avocado toast.
Okay.
Yeah. So, if you're thinking about the ratings too, right, you're going to give a rating on the goal, and a rating on the, and ratings on the standards. So if you have a goal where you say that goal was met, you're probably looking at proficient for the standards.
Right, but if you're looking at something that's like significant progress, you
Right.
can either use
You-
needs improvement or proficient,
Right.
however you are
Right.
interpreting that
Yep,
work.
yep,
Okay.
yep. They could, I mean, it's more often than not. I mean, it would be hard to say that you didn't meet a goal, but you were exemplary in the standard, right? Right. So there's generally some sense of some connection between the two. Okay, so you can, and I always say this with some degree of trepidation, decide on the weighting of the standards. And I say it because since I've been talking about this in 2014, I've only ever found one district that decided to do it. So you have 4 standards, right? And if you decide that there's significant emphasis that needs to be placed on one of those standards, you can give it more weight than the others in the evaluation. So where it would have an impact then is on the overall rating of the standards, right? If you're putting a lot of weight on a standard and it ends up being an exemplary and the other standards are rated as proficient, or a couple of them are rated as exemplary, you might find that heavier weighting leads the overall rating to be different on the standards. That's why part of explaining it and part of thinking that nobody really does it is part of the reason. It's available to, I have to tell you that the department allows it, but it's not a frequently used tool. And there's a reason why discussing the artifacts of evidence is in a different color. Because when I talk about having the discussion, putting a lot of emphasis on the beginning of the process and making it easier the rest of the way through, you're not flies on the wall all day. We talked about that last time I was here, right? You're not flies on the wall all day watching the superintendent do their job. So it can be hard sometimes to understand what exactly is happening. So when you have the opportunity to really talk to the superintendent or have the discussion at the beginning of, gee, superintendent, how will you show us the progress? How will you show us how the standard is being met? It does a couple things. It gets the superintendent thinking about, gee, how will I do that? What evidence can I show them that will help them understand the work? And it also helps the 6 minds involved to have the same understanding of the goal. Sometimes, there's the goal statement that people might interpret differently. And then once you start talking about what does it look like at the end if this goal is met or this standard is met, someone might say, well, wait, that's not my understanding. That's not what I'm looking for, and someone else. And then you can have that discussion. So that's part of what makes it easier at the end, when you all have the same understanding of what really it means to have those goals implemented.
You didn't talk about weighting the goals.
The department doesn't talk about weighting the goals.
Do we have the flexibility of weighting the
You
goals?
probably do.
Okay.
You probably do.
I mean,
But you don't give an overall rating on the goals. That's why, right? You give a rating on the goals, a rating on the standard, and an overall rating.
true, but
Summative
it's
rating.
quite likely that some goals are going to be more important than
Oh, yeah,
others.
yeah.
Which means that,
You could make that agreement, I'm sure.
okay.
Yep. Yep. Joyce?
I'm sorry.
In the past, something that I've tried to do myself as the year goes on is keep documents that are shared with us in a folder in a drive to refer back to in an evaluation. Is that a reasonable request of the superintendent?
It's a discussion you can have.
Okay.
I do know of superintendents who will sort of keep a Google file, goal 1, goal 2, goal 3, goal 4, and when there's a presentation or some evidence, they'll drop it in. So that you're sort of building things like exactly what you're saying. You're sort of building that knowledge as the year goes on about progress towards the goals, instead of having to, getting a sort of this data dump, like, here's all the evidence that I, superintendent, collected, here, let me show it to you. It's more, you're thinking more, but you're getting a review of what you've learned about all year. So, document development checklist. So first of all, you're going to agree on the goals. Part of when I talk about having that discussion at the beginning to try and make sure everyone has the same understanding, sometimes the thing that catches you up on the SMART goals is the M, right? Measurable. That you want to be measuring outcomes, not outputs. So you're measuring more than just a list of tasks that were completed. One of the ways that I think is helpful to think about it is if this goal is implemented, how will things change? How will things look different here at the end of this evaluation cycle? So you understand the outcome that you're looking for by having that goal. I'm going to pick on superintendents for a minute. A number of years ago, very legitimately, many superintendents started doing walkthroughs, right? With the intention of improving the education, improving instruction. But a lot of superintendents would have a goal that said, I'll do 12 walkthroughs. They got their 10,000 steps in, but what did it do for the district, right? So to say, I'm going to do walkthroughs with the intention of improving classroom management, whatever it is, improving profession, whatever it is, so that the committee understands that the walkthroughs were intentionally done with that aim for improvement and achieving a goal in the district, is a lot better than just a list of tasks. The task can be completed and not move you forward at all. So understanding how the goal is actually going to move you forward is the outcome piece that you're looking for. So when you're agreeing on the goals, you want to be thinking about what is the outcome that we're looking for by having those goals. Then agree on the applicable indicators, again, not too many. Determine the weighting of the standards if you choose, in any area that may need attention, and then discussing the evidence. So what is going to help the committee actually understand the work that's going to be done during the course of the year, so that when you get to that final that final evaluation, you'll be able to actually understand how things have moved forward as you're doing the evaluation. So, and when you have that discussion of evidence, the other thing that you can use it for is to create a sort of a year-long agenda that helps you monitor that progress like you were talking about, right? So it's not that, again, that data dump at the end. A lot of times committees will say, yeah, you know, we have an agenda. It tells us when we're going to review MCAS. It tells us when to do the budget hearing. It tells us when we're going to vote on school choice. So it's more a list of what are the responsibilities of the school committee. But if you can, when you have those SMART goals with key actions and benchmarks, and you can actually think about, okay, when does it make sense for us to get a presentation about what's going on with goal 1, what's going on with goal 2, then again, you're building that evidence all year long, and you're monitoring progress all year long, rather than we set the goals, we did a check-in, we're doing the evaluation. Make sense? So at the beginning, I said there were some elements that were required and some that are optional. Required is actually pretty easy. You need to have SMART goals in 2 or 3 areas: the district improvement goals, student learning goal, and professional practice. You need to have a rating on all 4 of the standards and an overall summative rating. So the things that are optional is you do not need to use all of the indicators, weighting the standards differently. The timing of the cycle is up to the committee and the superintendent to work out. As this model for evaluation has come into practice, many more committees are moving to an evaluation cycle and a goal-setting cycle that fits what the rest of the district is doing, as opposed to what many places did previously, which is tie it to the spring elections. But the timing is up to you, whatever makes sense. How the evaluation is used, contract extension, raise, bonus, you just do it. That's up to you. And the process for completing it varies from place to place. But I'll now talk a little bit about some of the common practices or some of the things to think about as you're completing that final evaluation. So first of all, if you're thinking about the timing of the cycle, really what you want to be thinking about, if this is goal-centered and moving the district forward, is what makes the most sense in terms of the planning and the district work. So when is the data available? What are some election time considerations? If you're moving it off of election times considerations, you want to be thinking about who participates and to what extent, if the group that set the goals is not necessarily the same group of people that will be doing the evaluation. And particularly if you're moving to a 2-year model, that's something you want to think about. So you want to... So you're completing the final evaluation. Most committees, every committee member completes the individual evaluation, right? So to me, this is like you sit down at your kitchen table, you empty off the table, and you've got everything in front of you to be able to do the work. You're going to have the self-assessment, so the superintendent's sort of recap of where things stand, the work that's been done during the year. The evidence of progress or proficiency, so progress on the goals and proficiency on the standard, and a form to complete the individual evaluation. Those individual evaluations will go to someone, typically the chair, who completes a composite. So taking all those evaluations together and putting them into one composite. So we talked last time about the fact that the superintendent only has one boss. Superintendent has only one evaluator, which is the committee as a whole. So it needs to end up with one evaluation in the end. Not that the superintendent doesn't see all the individual ones and get all that feedback, but your job as a committee is to give feedback and direction as a body so the superintendent knows how to move forward. So there needs to be one evaluation from the committee as a whole. As much as I talked about the importance of sort of spending time at the beginning, discussing the goals, discussing the process for preparation is also a conversation that is best to happen before you start the whole process of the final summative evaluation. I've certainly been places where a new chair takes a different approach than the former chair took, and the discussion of the composite evaluation becomes an argument about how it got put together rather than the evaluation of the superintendent. So having an understanding and an agreement about how do you take 5 evaluations, how do you take 5 ratings and come to one composite? How do you take, how do you going to handle the comments or the narrative and come up with one that is coherent, rather than, 5 different people's opinions that may be here and here. One of the things I forgot to mention was part of the value of having that goal discussion and discussing expectations at the beginning is you will find that the ratings are much closer aligned at the end if you all have the same understanding of what's intended to be accomplished. Make sense? And then once you have that composite evaluation, it is discussed and voted on at a public meeting. The superintendent just has the absolute joy of being evaluated in public. Part of the reason for any employee of a public body in Massachusetts is supposed to be evaluated in public. And part of the rationale for that is that it's part of the way the voters evaluate you, is seeing how you evaluate the superintendent. So when you're putting together that composite, as I said, it should be one document where everybody can hear their voice, right? It's, you want it to be coherent, but you want everybody to feel like their voice was heard in there. One of the things to discuss is how you get to those composite ratings. Ideally, you don't call them 1, 2, 3, 4 and take an average, or you don't just tally them up and not land somewhere. So deciding about how that composite, how that tally, or how that composite final rating is determined is a discussion to have ahead of time. And then how are the comments handled? Sometimes committees say, well, 2 people have to make kind of a similar comment, so that there's not a lot of outlier comments. If you're thinking, well, I don't want to lose my voice, remember, this is a public discussion. So if you made a comment that you want to see in that final evaluation and you didn't see it, you always have the chance to say, I would like to amend this document to add that comment. So, yes.
But that would require a vote to approve the amendment,
Yeah, it would.
correct?
Yep,
Okay.
yep.
So, worst case, you get to verbalize it, okay? But it may or may not get incorporated
Right.
into the final document.
Right, you've got to convince a majority of your,
So essentially, what
Colleagues
you
to-
have is a school committee chair or designee, okay, creating this document, crossing his or her fingers that there's not too many amendments thrown out during this final process, and then ultimately the amended, if it is amended, document gets voted on by the full school committee.
yep, but I'm going to go back to saying, if you have that discussion about what's going to happen in the comments, and you have that good discussion at the beginning about what the committee is expecting from the superintendent, you will find much more ability to have those comments reflect the same type of things. One of the best, when I looked at some composite evaluations, one of the ones that I thought was really effective in the way they did it was the compiler took a couple of representative quotes and then summarized the rest of the comments under that for each of the goals and so forth. So I mean, this gets. I've sat there for hours and hours and hours putting together a composite evaluation, trying to make sure that every committee member felt. I mean, it takes some time and to say, I know this is really important for this committee member, and to make sure that 5 people can read it and feel like they heard their voice come through in that composite.
But in order to know, are you suggesting that all 5 evaluations are privy to all 5 members of the school committee before that meeting takes place?
So you can do that. They
Because
become public.
otherwise, the comments
Right. So
could be a
yes.
total surprise.
Right. So yes, you can be privy to each other's, because how else can you have a discussion about the
Exactly.
final composite if you don't really know what
But
your
that's
fellow
never
member
been done
said?
in my experience.
It's done other places.
It is done other places.
Yep.
And it's made privy, how? How does everyone?
In the packet?
Just in the packet, okay.
Yeah.
It has been done here.
You did?
Maybe when you weren't.
No, it was never done, yeah. They all went secretly to the chair, and then the product appeared, and whatever.
Can I ask a question?
Sure,
Is this
sure,
a good time to ask about when the superintendent is given the evaluation?
The superintendent should absolutely see the evaluation before the public discussion of the evaluation.
Great, yeah.
Because, partly you try to operate on no surprises, right?
Right.
And if there's something in that evaluation where the superintendent may choose to comment and have an explanation or a rebuttal, I guess, it's only fair that the superintendent get to see what's going to be presented.
The composite or does the superintendent see all 5?
The superintendent should see all of the evaluations,
Okay.
right?
I agree, yeah.
Just,
Yeah.
I'm not disagreeing, I'm
Yeah.
just clarifying.
No. At the same time I say there's only one boss and one final evaluation, the superintendent should know what everyone's thinking is, right? That's only fair.
You keep saying fair, like this whole process is fair.
Honestly, there are certainly superintendents who find value in this process because of the discussions that happen during the course of the process, and the ability to focus on the
Can you count
goals and
them on
moving
more
the
than one
district
hand?
forward. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So,
Nope,
Oh,
sorry.
sorry. So
Oh,
just a
sorry.
question to either probably Joyce or Kevin. So is our, clearly we haven't done things the way that it's being sort of outlined now. I know things have changed and other districts have done other things. Is the way that we've done it historically been because that's a policy that the school committee in Wareham has had on how we do the evaluation? Or has it just been a standard of practice that has been sort of inherited down the road? Or is that something that policy review should have a part of with how it's been outlined so far?
So I would say, as chair, it was based on past practice, although I did things a little different, maybe than past chairs. But this is going forward, so now we have formed a superintendent evaluation subcommittee. So it was my thought that we would come up with an outline of the process that we would follow, lots of things that Dorothy's talking about. And I don't know if it would be considered a policy or,
So can I just, many districts have a policy on superintendent evaluation, which basically says the evaluation will align with DESI.
I'm sure we have that
Yeah,
policy.
it's not procedure. Like, what you're talking about is procedure.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
And
So,
procedure
yes.
is not policy.
Right, so we do have that policy.
I was just,
But,
yeah, so I
yeah.
think I was looking for the distinction between whether or not that would be like a policy or a procedure, and if it was how it was outlined and where it fell, so, thank you.
Yeah.
But our plan is for our subcommittee to meet in the very near future, because Matt is scheduled to present goals in the next meeting, so we're kind of in a time crunch by our own schedule. I mean, we can adapt if need to, but the subcommittee needs to get working with Matt to present to us, and then we can have that goal discussion.
I'm listening to you say, all these things that should be discussed by the whole, we're going to need this on the agenda at every meeting to have all this. I know that's not realistic, but that's a lot of discussion.
But we
Maybe
can look
it's a
forward
workshop.
and to put
Maybe
some
it's-
things on. I like what you're saying about kind of the transparency in the process and just being clear and asking the
Yep.
questions
Well,
before
it's
the
a-
end when it's May and all of a sudden you go, no.
I think it's as important that we are all on the same page as it is that we have a clear, the superintendent knows exactly that communication is clear also. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So, like I said, the goals are going to be specific to the individual superintendent and the district, And you want to be considering the progress on the, as you're thinking about, sitting at that kitchen table or wherever in front of your laptop, you're considering the progress that's been made on the action items that have been defined in the goals and referring to the evidence provided by the superintendent or that you've built up during the course of the year. And then again, just remember the standards and indicators are the same for all superintendents throughout the state. And that's really that whole slide. So as you're putting together your composite or your own individual evaluation, what you're trying to keep in mind is that the evidence and self-assessment have been provided to you. That's what you have to base your evaluation on, as well as your observations, right? You've been seeing the superintendent at meetings and other places and had communication throughout the year. So you have your own observations. It's not just limited to the evidence that you've been provided. Keep in mind the time frame of the evaluation. If, once the superintendent has been here 2 or 3 years, the evaluation is on that cycle, not what happened 2 or 3 years ago. And you want to be tying your rating and your comments to the evidence and observations that you have to be true to the process. So there's a couple of resources available. We have a book, a little narrative, which basically outlines everything that I've talked about on our website. And Desi has some videos. You want to do the next screen? Desi has some, sorry. Desi has some videos that can be helpful. These videos take a number of districts across the state, suburban, urban, regional, and there's the superintendent and the school committee chair are talking about how they implemented different parts of the process and made it what you questioned whether it could actually be, which is a process that helped with good communication, with good working relationship with the superintendent, and how they worked on the different parts of it to make it work well for them. So that's another tool that you might look at to learn a little bit more about the evaluation process. Are there any other questions?
What's your recommendation for a time when individual evaluations come in before the turnaround to the composite?
Enough time to give the chair.
Hypothetically.
Right. Probably the best thing to do is give, this is ballpark, right? That a month before you have that final evaluation on your agenda, you're giving the materials to the committee to start to do their individual ones. So the committee, each individual member has a better part of 2 weeks to put it together to get any answers to questions that they may have, and then the chair has roughly a couple weeks to put together that composite without being too rushed. I get, in the springtime, calls from chairs saying, I've told this member a number of times, we're a month late now because the member won't get their evaluation to me. At some point, if that happens, the chair has to say, going ahead, we're doing the evaluation, and you're just not going to be included in the composite. So you need to, and you need to set that out at the beginning, right? Mm-hmm. This is a firm deadline, please get it to me, or I'm going to have to go ahead and create the composite without that. So I see Joyce nodding her head.
Did you have a question, Joyce, too?
It was probably me. I'm terrible at doing things on time.
No.
Oh, okay. Phew.
I just have 2 questions. Are you going to share this slideshow with us? Could that be shared?
Yes, you
Okay.
have it, right?
I do have it.
Yep.
Okay, could you share it?
Yep.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yep,
Okay.
absolutely.
And my other question was just about the focus indicators. So once the superintendent has proposed goals, does he propose what the indicators will be, or does the school committee?
So much like the superintendent proposes the goals, the superintendent usually will at least say, here's a starting point for discussion, bring that to the, it sounds like your evaluation subcommittee for discussion. Everything is that the superintendent is a proposal or a recommendation. The school committee has the final say.
Okay. That's what I was hoping you would say.
Yep.
So, I hate to admit it, but for better or for worse, I was on the committee, the state committee, that created the prior version of the superintendent evaluation process. There was an associate commissioner, a wonderful lady, she's probably not around.
I was on it too. Carla Bear.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, exactly. And the biggest difference between what you described tonight and it seems to me the old version, and correct me if I'm wrong, is the elimination of the elements
Yep.
and the flexibility to eliminate some of the indicators.
Interestingly, that flexibility has always been there, but the department went, and I was a part of with Carla again, and one member from DESI and Chris McGrath and I drafted the indicator level one. That has always, the ability to limit it has always been there.
I never knew that.
But the department is now much more verbal, I guess, clear, that it's something that is available and recommended. I mean, if you look at the front page of the rubric, it actually talks about focus indicators.
Okay,
Thank you for that. That's helpful, I think, for us going forward, for sure. Anyone else have any questions on the evaluation?
One more.
April,
So-
yep.
When we've done our evaluations historically, we also had like a mathematical conversion. Was that district specific, or is that something
That is
that?
definitely district-specific.
Okay,
It drives me bananas.
okay. I was just curious, because I know for me, that was like,
The whole idea of,
Being
the whole idea of having the descriptors is to get away from just giving them a number, right? And trying to do the average.
we could argue both sides of this.
yeah, because I was gonna say, like, I can
Well,
see
yeah,
this
and
as,
I
like,
had one
having a
I had one committee that said, well,
mathematical
we're going to
scale
look at the mean, median, and mode and see how they match up, and I don't,
I just wasn't sure if that was something that was a practice in other
it
districts,
is,
or if it
yes,
was.
it is a practice in other districts.
Would you say percentage-wise, how many
Oh, I
districts would
can't,
utilize?
I can't even guess.
Okay.
I can't even guess. But you're not alone.
Okay, as long as we're not alone.
Dr. DeAndrea, any questions on the evaluation process?
The only question I have is, when you mentioned the elements, is that correct?
That, they don't exist anymore.
All right, so the standards that we're going to look at for evaluation, and you said not too many,
The indicators.
the indicators,
Right.
that's right, sorry.
Yep.
You said not too many.
Yeah.
What's not too many? Like, what would be a range?
So ballpark is usually 6 to 8.
Okay.
Now, that's 6 to 8 out of? A lot, right? 'Cause
About 20, about 20.
Every standard has 4 or 5 of them, so, so you're cutting,
Not anymore, really. Yeah.
the bottom
There's
line
only
is
about 20.
you're recommending we cut essentially half or more of the indicators. That'll be hard for me to swallow, but I'll work on it.
That's all we can ask.
I
Joyce?
just want to point out that we did not use the numeric scale for our last evaluation, correct?
I thought we did.
No.
I don't think you used it in this, I think we did it, because I remember filling it out, but I don't know if you used it.
No, it was not used. So I guess my question is, going forward, I was of the understanding that we were no longer using it. But is that,
I think that's going to be up to the committee, I think.
We'll make a recommendation.
I think the
Committee will
subcommittee would probably
decide.
make a recommendation, or if the subcommittee happens to be split, then it'll come forward to the whole committee, and we'll have to decide at
Yeah.
that point.
well, because in all fairness, Dr. DeAndrea's contract was written saying that he would be evaluated based on the DESI
It
evaluation.
does say that.
So,
Except the DESI evaluation process gives us the flexibility to create one.
okay,
You're not off the hook.
all right,
Well, I'll let the subcommittee make a recommendation to us in 2 weeks.
all
Thank you for the evaluation workshop. Before you go, I know we had some draft protocols that everyone has a copy in front of them that we discussed. One of the practices of a school committee was coming up with some norms or protocols. We have 10 here. Later on tonight, we hope to come to some agreement and vote on them at the end of the meeting. But while you were here, I didn't know if you had, I'm going to ask you just a question. Could you maybe specify what you mean by request for information in bullet number 5, or what Mass kind of thinks about that?
Yeah, so really that gets to what we talked about at the last workshop about not overburdening the administrative staff and making sure that the superintendent knows the questions that are being asked and the information that's being requested. So it's not meant to be, run into somebody in the hallway and you can't talk to them. It's more meant to be requests for information that may, nor is it meant to be a subcommittee that may be like a finance subcommittee working with the business manager, right? Not saying, well, we can't really work with the business manager without going through a superintendent. That's not what it's intended. It's more to protect the superintendent's ability to manage the time of the staff and know what the questions are being asked, so that staff time and effort, he knows where he can direct where staff time and effort is going.
So I'll just open to the committee as just a discussion right now, no vote right now, but just questions or concerns on any of these particular protocols. So I just took the draft, I took the liberty as chair of just putting something together so we have something to discuss. April?
So I understand what you're saying by, to not burdening the staff, but I think that especially given the history of things that have gone on in district prior to the current committee and current staff, let's just say, I just have a hard time looking with number 5, only because it's not specific enough the way that it's written. So like I understand request for information if you're looking for test scores, if you're looking for any sort of documentation that would take time or effort, but say that you had like information that was brought to your attention about something that was being done throughout the district that you had questions about, and it wouldn't be appropriate to run those questions through the superintendent because hypothetically it had to do with the superintendent and you're trying to get clarification or more information to validate whether you need to go further or not with it. It's not specific enough for me, the way that it's worded, to include it, the way that it's written. For channel, because it says just channel requests for information through superintendent and chair rather than directly to staff. So it's not necessarily, it's just not specific enough for me, given things that have gone on historically. I understand for that particular purpose, but should something come up, I like to be prepared for any potential situation because we were in situations I never expected to be in. And I would have seeking permission or having a chat, like if there was an instance where you had something that you needed to ask and that was like, you were not allowed to then get that information or ask information that you felt was necessary to do your job.
So these are your protocols, so I would suggest that maybe the discussion moved to the committee, and if you had a suggestion for how it would make sense to you, what would that be?
I just think I didn't know if Mass had more clear version of what was written. I don't know. I know that you, I think, took it from MASC, the way that this is written now. So I didn't know if you had any idea of how other committees had worded that, if that's something that can be stricken from the protocol altogether, or, have some sort of, it's something that I've had issue with the entire time I've been on the committee is if a school committee person is looking for information and they think that there is an issue, sometimes it's a roadblock to have to get permission to do certain things, or, if there's a question that is pertinent to, say, something that's legal going on and you need that information, you should circumvent that person. So I probably view things a little bit differently because I had a little bit more of a traumatic experience with the whole process. But that's just the way that it's worded now, I'd be fine with everything. I just didn't know if you had other districts that have done it differently.
Can I answer that? I did a little research today, because you know that's what I do. And I wanted to see what other districts do, because as you know, I'm a big fan of this protocols, that this is something that we've discussed before, because I've brought it up. So OR, Bourne, Carver, Middleborough, and Fairhaven all have a similar document stated exactly the same way. So it's obvious that they're getting their direction from MASC, but it's stated exactly the same way. It's either, I don't believe it's a policy, but it's listed
not-
as
yeah, it's
part of
not a
their school
policy.
committee documents.
Yeah.
Something that they've adopted.
I mean, anything that we put out isn't, a little bit different than when we put out a model policy where it's, gone through, making sure it complies with law and regulation. Anything we have is sort of, here's some, you might not have to reinvent the wheel, here's some suggestions. So it really is up to you whether, there's nothing that MASC says that says, oh, if you have protocols, you must include this. Am I making sense?
Yep, absolutely.
So they're yours, they're what works for you.
Matt, you look like you want to say something.
So when I read that, number 5, why I think that's important is if school committee members are reaching out to staff and asking questions, staff may not know the answer or may not give the correct answer. It opens up for the possibility of misinformation going out and just creating lots of confusion. If there's a consistent source of where the information comes, I can give you guys a consistent message. I understand what you're saying, April. I do. It's just if there is a lot of conversations going on about a certain topic, there's going to be all kinds of misunderstandings and misinformation. For me to try to run the district as best as I can, I need to make sure you guys are getting the accurate information and you know what's going on. And I fear that if you go to staff members, you're not going to get accurate information. Not that they're going to be lying, but they may not know that things may have changed. And so for me, it just makes it easier for me to make sure you guys have the information you need and it's accurate.
And I do get that, and I understand. That's why I think if this was, maybe it's the wording of the way that this is, if it's more black and white of what kind of information, I think that would make me feel a little bit better about it. It's just, as it stands right now, it's way too vague for me to be okay with.
Andrea?
I just, first of all, I want to say that I completely understand why or where you're coming from. So I'm not coming from a place where I don't know. But I do think we have an opportunity to develop a safe, healthy, transparent place to serve our students and our faculty in a way that works. And this protocol gives us all an opportunity to move forward in a very healthy, transparent way. So although I don't want to discount what you're saying, and I completely understand it, we have an opportunity here to really do something fantastic. And I think this is just adding to that ability to do so.
I understand that, and like I said, I think my thing is more the way that it's worded, more than the possibility of having that in there. I would just feel more comfortable if it was possibly, like, more like channel district-specific information requests through the superintendent, you know what I mean? Or through the chair, or vice versa, you know what I mean? Chair or superintendent. I just, the way that it's worded right now, it feels very like autonomous, because like, you know, we've been taught as a school committee that the chair is the voice of the body, it's not the boss of the body. You know what I mean? So
I'm more than glad to take chair out of there and just say right to the superintendent, honestly, if that helps.
Well, but there might also be instances where, like, it's, you know, like, again, when there's legal counsel involved, where, you know what I mean? It might be something that you couldn't ask the superintendent specifically. You'd have to ask the chair, because that has happened. Not that I'm saying it's going to, I'm really hopeful, and obviously, like, in a good, but I'm the, you know, the type of person, like, when stuff has happened, then you know that it can happen. So when you have a protocol, you need to be prepared for the devil's advocate for anything that could possibly ever happen again, because it's not impossible.
But you're never going to have something that covers every possible situation.
No, that's why I think
mean,
just having it slightly less vague, but just a little bit more specific with word, like just the
well,
wording.
I would
If
ask you
someone
as we go on with the meeting to maybe
Yep,
think about that, and when we vote later on, maybe come up with some language at that point that we can talk about, because I want to be respectful of Dorothy's time, who's overtime right now, and was due to start in 5 minutes anyway with our regular portion of our meeting. So, any other questions about anything else? Any other items on that? Number 9?
You can wait till we discuss.
Okay. Okay. So, thank you.
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you, Dorothy.
You're very welcome. Can I just compliment you on keeping it relatively short? And not burying it as a rule book?
Right.
I think that's something I always encourage with protocols, is, you know, that's not intended to be a rule book for how the school committee operates, but just some agreements on operating and communication that help things go smoothly, so.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Dorothy. Say hi to Glenn for us.
Will do.
All right, so we will revisit that at agenda item number 10 later in the evening. So right now, we are at the public participation portion on our agenda. Is there anyone that would like to address the committee? Seeing no one, we will go to good news. Anyone want to share some good news? Matt?
Just that it was a very successful first week of school, and we're off to a great start. Thank you to all of our staff for being ready and doing a great job welcoming our students. We had right through August, we had over 150 new registrations come in, and that certainly made things challenging for the beginning of the school year, but everybody worked very hard to get those kids in. We're still actually working on that, but it was a good week, and we've smoothed out a lot of the hiccups that happened, but overall, it was a good week.
April?
Was that throughout all schools, or was that more concentrated in one school more than another?
That was spread out. That was spread out. There was a little bit higher at the high school,
Wow,
but
okay.
but overall, it was pretty much spread out.
Very cool, thank you.
All right. That's it. We will then, Jeff, go ahead.
You'll be happy to know, I haven't had a single email or verbal complaint about schools from anybody. Okay.
On wood.
So
Knock on
I
wood.
take that as no news as good news. And I realize October 1st is the key date from DESI perspective, but how does enrollment compare, just approximately, for this school year compared to last school year?
So rough numbers, we've got about 2,000 students, as in today's enrollment. That is a rough estimate. I can probably give you a better number at our next meeting.
So that sounds about the same as last year.
Right.
Yes? Okay. Thank you.
Okay, next up, we have student representative reports, Indiana.
All right. Hello, everyone. So, as we were saying, school has started. We're 4 days in now, and things are going great. A huge shout out, I gave one last meeting, but I have to do it again to our guidance department, who is working really, I mean, I was talking to my guidance counselor, and she gets about 50 to 100 emails a day about schedule changes. So I empathize with that a lot, and I think that's a difficult job. So I want to give a shout out to the department there and Mr. Palladino and our administration for helping make the transition back to school a smooth one this year. The class of 2023, actually, on the first day of school, hosted a little photo booth in the cafeteria at all lunches. It was very well received by the students. So that's awesome. The pictures are on the senior class Instagram, if anyone wants to check those out. There's one of me and Mr. Palladino on there. The senior class will also be hosting a car wash this Saturday at the West Wareham Fire Station. So not the one on Main Street, but the West Wareham one from 9 to 1. So please come out and support our senior class and get a nice car wash before the fall. Volleyball and girls soccer had scrimmages today, so that's really exciting. Games will start next week, so that's also very exciting. Fall sports are in full swing. CYE, Community Youth Empowerment, is an organization that does a lot within the schools, and I know we were talking about this last meeting, but they've officially opened their student intern applications, and I happen to be an intern for CYE. Amazing experience, lots of resources there. I've gotten job offers, I've gotten tons of help with my professional development, so any students that are interested in an opportunity like that can email warehamcye@gmail.com, and there's also opportunities for mentorships with adults, so anyone else looking to get involved with that organization, shoot them an email and they'll be happy to help. So last year, before we left for the summer, the junior class officers developed a student sentiment survey, is what we called it, and sent it out to the juniors via social media and the resources we had. And we found that we need improvement and more student input in 3 specific areas, and I thought it'd be helpful if I shared them. So the 3 areas were school spirit, mental health, and DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and those were the top 3 areas. So the plan, we were talking a lot over the summer about how we can improve those as students, and the idea is hopefully to start or create student-ran committees in each of these areas to help gather feedback from students specifically and boost improvement in those areas and really help as much as we can. So that's exciting. And then the news I was talking about earlier, so as I'm a new student representative, I was invited to do some work with the Massachusetts Association of Student Reps, which is an organization that is largely funded in part by MASC, and that aims to connect student representatives, provide them with training, and they lobby for legislative priorities decided entirely by students. So a great new organization, and the exciting news is, after doing some work with them for the past month or so, I've been invited to join their team as an interim member of their executive board and their leadership team. So exciting stuff to come from that in the future, and I'll be sure to keep you guys updated. And that's all I got for today. So we'll see you in 2 weeks.
No, go ahead. Jeff?
Yes.
I would have been shocked if that last announcement hadn't occurred, but my question is, I unfortunately didn't have a chance to stay and watch for very long, but there appeared to be a very serious soccer game on the softball field over in the past week, and I wondered if you knew anything about it. It looked like it was males and females, some alumni, some current students. Any knowledge of what that game was?
I'm not exactly sure. I know there has been some kids that they've started a little de facto volleyball league.
Oh, this was
That-
definitely
so if
soccer.
it's- Okay.
This was definitely soccer. Okay.
And I'm not, I mean, the girls practice on the softball
Oh,
field
I'm
out there.
very well aware
so-
of this, but there were guys, lots of guys involved in this, and they look like guys that had graduated.
It was the girls and boys scrimmage last Saturday.
Ah,
You were here, you were there. I was there
And,
too.
but there were no graduates, they were just
That
current?
evening, there were no graduates.
Really? I thought I recognized people who had graduated. It was,
You're watching,
what?
but not playing.
Okay, they were having a lot of fun.
The football team had a scrimmage today, too.
oh, okay, there we go. 3 scrimmages. That's awesome. I know field hockey was trying to do a scrimmage, but we didn't end up doing that.
I was trying to find out who won, but I think they just left.
Yeah, that must be the reason for the parking out there. It's very tight.
Indiana, you had mentioned the community CYE,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
How did students, I mean, no offense, but I don't know how many students are staying up watching us right now.
Right.
So how do they hear about that during the school day?
So I also happen to do the morning announcements at Wareham High. So we make sure to publicize. We do workshops throughout the year every 2 weeks, so we always announce those.
Okay.
And I'll definitely announce this opportunity too. It's relatively new that we released the application, but that would be the main way. And then I guess I mean they promote it on their social media, which has a decent following from students. So,
Okay.
but I mean we can promote it in other ways too.
And do you have time to take classes and study at school?
I try.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Can I just add to
Yes,
that?
go ahead.
So the CYE, I had actually got an email today from Jawan Gamble, and because I had spoken to them, and he's going to share the calendar, and I know we are going to, talk about the website, so I said I would lobby to be able to put some of those events on our website too, because they really are trying to serve the students and
Right.
create opportunities for our students, so.
And I mean, I think the biggest problem in the past is, I mean, we even had a great number and a great group of kids at workshops last year, like 20 people every workshop, which is good. But we want to make sure where I feel like we had a certain like dynamic there, and we want or a certain like we want more. What's the word I'm looking for? All students represented, and all, like, I mean, I know I've had long conversations with some of you about, like, we have high-level students, low-level students, middle ground students, and I think we just want to make sure we're representative of all those groups, exactly. So hopefully that's our goal for this year, or one of our big goals, is to make sure we're representing all students with that.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, next up on our agenda, we have the principal reports. We're starting out with Wareham Elementary School, and welcome to Dr. Chandler. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you, school committee. Appreciate it. We had an excellent start at Wareham Elementary School. We welcomed 681 students, grades 1 through 4, on August 29th. Preschool and kindergarten orientation has begun and happening all week long. This is an opportunity for our youngest population to meet their teacher, see their classroom, receive their bus tags, and know where their cubbies are. And we will be welcoming 239 students on Wednesday, September 7th, for a total of 920 students thus far, a few more registering in. So we had a very full open house last evening for grades 1 through 4, where families had the opportunity to meet the teachers, see the classrooms, and take a tour of our beautiful school. Our upcoming events, we have a kindergarten showcase on October 6th and the ever-famous Elementary Picture Day on October 24th. And so always a popular day. And I just want to say thank you to all of the staff, everyone included in all of our Wareham Elementary School, to make our first day and every day such a success in our building and teaching our students every day. Questions?
Any questions for Dr. Chandler?
Your biggest concern?
Well, I don't know if I don't have any concerns.
Baloney.
No, I don't. You know what? No, I don't have any concerns. I have goals to improve attendance, to continue with our literacy, to make sure that every child is happy and successful each and every day, enjoying their, and know their work. But I don't, and I always have challenges, and each day those challenges change. And I think that that is a concern, because as a school principal, you don't know what the challenge is each day, as you may know.
Okay, let me try a different tack.
Okay.
What's your most difficult goal for this year?
My most difficult goal is to, I think attendance is just coming back out of COVID and creating the urgency of being at school each and every day, and the importance of being at school each and every day for students and staff and our whole school community. That's my urgency.
I understand. The New York Times had a thing, 50,000 students didn't show up for school in Los Angeles. 50. So I think you're right. Attendance is undoubtedly every principal's biggest challenge, and probably the most important one too. If they're not there, they're not learning. Thank you.
That's it. Thank you.
So you
Yes,
said
Ms. Rossi?
currently you'll have, with the 239 and the 681 students, you'll have 920, and you said you still have students registering?
Yes.
Is that for kindergarten specific?
Mostly
Okay.
kindergarten registering, and I will still have an influx, I guarantee you, mid-September. And our preschool is ever enrolling, so I ended last year with about approximately 965 students. I guarantee, I estimate that probably when we meet again in October, I will be probably at 960.
Make sure they know to show up before October 1st.
Yes, I know. There's another goal.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Joyce?
I don't have a question. I just want to thank you and all the other principals for being here tonight after what I'm sure has been a very busy couple of weeks. So thank you for coming here
Yes,
tonight.
no.
to share
It
your
was a great
updates.
energy. It's so great to have the students all back with their smiling faces, and they're just all so happy to be there. The energy just rises so much from, well, actually, we had quite a number of students this whole summer at Wareham Elementary, over 400 each day on Monday through Thursday. So, but still, the energy just rises so much when they all come in and they're so excited to learn. The enthusiasm is really, really exciting.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Next up, Wareham Middle School, Principal Tracy Cote.
Good evening.
Good evening.
All right, Wareham Middle School is at about 450 students. We had a fabulous start. So it started with our staff. They came back with a lot of energy after a very short summer, and it just built from there. So the kids coming this week was a highlight, and we just felt relaxed and all happy to be back. And I do think that was 3 years of going in and out of COVID and not knowing what was to be. It felt normal, and it felt like a wonderful start. So we're excited to welcome parents into the building for open house next Thursday, September 8th from 5:30 to 7. We do have a book fair that we haven't had in a very long time on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday for the students, and it will be open during our open house. We have clubs starting in a couple of weeks, and just a really good start. We're all very, very exhausted. So if you walked around my building today, not only were the kids tired, but the staff was tired. So I am happy that we have a 4-day week. Questions, concerns?
Joyce?
You just mentioned clubs, so is that after school?
Yes,
And remind me, do we have a late bus on any day? No,
not yet.
I didn't think so. Okay.
We're going to let Dr. DeAndrea get settled before we talk to him about that. We didn't even bring that up to him
Hint,
today.
hint.
All right. Well, you brought up clubs, that's what made me.
Yeah.
In terms of staffing, are you in good shape right now?
I'm in good shape. I have one position that's still open, but I'm hopeful.
Okay. Jeff?
Same question to
I
you.
have tons of concerns.
Do you really? Okay, I'll just take the biggest one. The biggest one.
I guess my biggest concern after last year is really the lack of social skills. COVID's changed a lot of us. And what we've learned from last year is that many of our children have come without the social skills that they typically come to us with. So we talked as a staff a lot about that at last year, but this year what we're going to do about it. So it's hard to be in a building with 450 middle schoolers if we can't have the necessary social skills, how to be polite to each other, how to communicate with each other, how not to touch each other in a way that someone doesn't like. So those certain things we're working on so that we can be a school community that can really learn and grow together. So that's one of our concerns. Certainly attendance is high up there. If they're not in school, we can't teach and learn, so.
Interesting. Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
And let's see, Mr. Palladino, Wareham High School.
Well, I think we'll keep the theme going. The first week was just amazing, testament to our staff, everyone from the custodians to the paras to the secretaries, teachers, administration, having the students back on a traditional schedule with no masks, no restrictions. It's been awesome. The students are appreciative of the traditional start to the school year. The staff, as I mentioned, have really stepped up. And we had a couple of late staff changes due to late notice of moving out of town and another situation where a person stayed for a longer medical situation. So we really had to kind of shuffle, and people are still kind of helping to support us as we transition. I just want to give another shout out to the custodians. As many of you know, summer school literally ended like a week before we opened the school. And that's not easy to get those rooms cleaned and ready to go for day one. So big shout out to the custodians. The technology department did an amazing job getting out the technology, coming here at night when we had our open house, and then obviously being there during the school day to get those out. We've got almost all the Chromebooks, not all, but almost all the Chromebooks out to the students that have turned in a permission form. We currently have 627 students enrolled, and we're growing every day, as you heard from Dr. DeAndrea. We have a few students waiting to be added to transportation, and we anticipate having that resolved by next week. Fall sports are, as you heard from India, well underway, and there are really very strong numbers with our football and volleyball programs. And as was mentioned by Tracy, the clubs and after-school activities have started and will continue to start into next week. And that is my report.
Jeff?
Are you going to ask me my biggest worry?
Yes. But before you answer that one, I just wanted to let you know I'm getting rave reviews related to your new volleyball coach.
Great.
They love her.
I can tell because they just keep coming out of the woodworks to participate, and we've got 3 full teams and still growing. It's
Wow.
amazing. So that's great to hear. Thanks for sharing that.
Oh, no, it was my pleasure, and I always ask them. So, yes, do you have any concerns?
My concern, quite frankly.
Or what is your biggest challenge?
Well, let me answer my biggest concern. It's just been such a wonderful opening that I'm wondering when the honeymoon's going to end.
Tomorrow.
Fair enough. No, it's been really a great opening, and it's a great group of 8th graders, Tracy, as well, I might add. One of the best groups, and I know I'm only a few days in, so I don't want to jinx it, but one of the best group of 8th graders I've seen come through. So I know that's maybe not fair because of the pandemic and everything. We didn't get a full view of all 8th graders coming in day one in a traditional setting, but it's really been a great group, and it's been a great start. So my biggest fear is the ball is going to drop at some point in time, but we're going to ride the wave as long as we can here. So it's been a great start.
I met 5 of those 8th graders this summer. They are good.
Very impressive.
Yeah.
Brennan, you?
I just didn't know if this was the time to bring it up. I remember at the last meeting, we had the issues with signing for the accounts or anything. Is now a good time to bring it up to Mr. Pellegrini here to find out about that, or is that later?
No, we'll do that at the end of this discussion, I think. Okay. I did have a question. We met with the finance committee the other night. It was supposed to be a meet and greet, and it turned into a little bit more than a meet and greet. But one of the committee members had concerns saying that the middle school's been renovated. We have a brand-new elementary school. And so now the high school is, in a sense, the oldest building in the school building in the district, in a way.
Isn't it? It's very weird.
And they were concerned that some elements of the building weren't maybe the way as I don't know, not as great shape as they could be. Do you have any of those concerns, or are there parts of the building that worry you, or any part of the physical condition of the building?
Sure. I mean, it's a 35-year-old building, right? And, you know, there are some things that we're working on. You're going to hear from Eric in a little bit about the boilers. And so there are pieces to the school that we're working on. Certainly some concerns with lighting that we're going to work through. You know, the doors, windows, there are some things that we certainly need to pay attention to, but my hope is now that the elementary school is up and running and the middle school is in fine shape, we can focus on the oldest school in the district, which when I started was brand new and was the newest school in the district. So it's kind of weird, and it's real weird for me to walk through the elementary school because I remember that feeling when I started. It was a brand new school, all the bells and whistles. It was pretty cool when we had those meetings over there. But I do think, and I hope it kind of happens organically, where, you know, the maintenance now can kind of kick a little bit more to the high school, where before it probably had to be spread between the three schools a little bit more. So I anticipate those conversations happening and more attention being put on the high school. And also, I want the high school to kind of, as the kids would say, pop when they get to the high school, because they're going to be used to all the bells and whistles at the elementary school. Like, we can't let them down when they go to the middle school and the high school. So we really need to start thinking about how we're going to pick up our game in regards to those bells and whistles, but also handling just the basic needs of the school as a physical plant. But I think, you know, the roof is brand new, the boilers will be brand new. We've done a ton of work on the HVAC, so it's not, you know, any unusual issues that I think that we're dealing with in a school that's 35 years old. And I tell you, the people that come in from the outside remark on how great the school looks for being, you know, a school that was built in the early 90s.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Jeff?
You know, kids react to technology, as you know, more than almost anything. And I still get kids, high school kids, telling me that the Wi-Fi is erratic. Now, I haven't delved into exactly what that word means to them, but I'm happy to hear you say we don't need to build a new building.
No.
We just need to make some key things, key improvements that would make people feel it's a modern school that they're walking into. Have you thought about what's on that list?
Well, I gave you a couple right off the top of my head. Lighting, doors, windows.
Lighting, doors, and windows.
And when I say doors, I mean exterior doors.
Okay. Yeah, and that's a security issue as well.
It is. The metal doors, and they're kind of rusting from the inside out. If you come into the high school, you'll see we started the project. We replaced the two front doors, which are the most used doors, and the first doors people see. So we're hoping to strategically kind of go right around the building and replace, I believe there's about 46 doors that exit the building. It's a lot, but you need them, obviously, in case of an emergency.
Yeah, the sad thing is that it would be wonderful if we could spend the ESSER money on that stuff instead of what we're being.
And there might be MSBA funding down the road to do something like that. I mean, obviously, you want to take care of the boilers first. That's paramount.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you. And then if I can just mention, I'm in every building, I'm in every classroom throughout the building, and I'm going to tell you, the Wi-Fi is great. And we have maps that...
I believe you.
We have maps that will back up. The connectivity is very powerful throughout the school. And we've even made some adjustments over the summer with Phil and Bonnie, and I think it's even better now than it was last year.
Good news is that all those people that were complaining, they've graduated.
Well, I think what they're complaining about is they can't watch videos because we've limited the technology for the kids on the guest Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
Bonnie can explain it way better than I can, but that's probably the issue. There you go.
Okay.
April and then Joyce?
So I know that Dr. Andrea mentioned that a lot of the enrollments of that, the new registrations were at the high school. was that throughout all grade levels? Have you seen it for like the 8th and like the younger grades, or have there been specific reasons that, or is it people moving into town? Are they coming because of like the IB program? Is there anything specific that you've heard about the new registrations for the high school?
Well, I've met with quite a few, and they're mostly 8th and 9th graders that I meet with. There's not a lot of upperclassmen that transfer in, which is probably good. It's tough to transfer in as a junior or senior into a high school after you've been somewhere else. But it's pretty even, and you know, there's some juniors, but it's pretty even, kind of spread out evenly. Like Dr. DeAndrea said, in the district, it's kind of that way in the high school. I haven't seen a senior yet, but it's mostly 8th and 9th and 10th grade.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Joyce?
My question is just about the lighting. So you said lighting. Did the lighting in the back of the school outside, did that ever get done?
That's on the list. We spent a lot of time and money trying to get that fixed, and Eric's done a great job bringing people in. We're still working on that. I'm hoping we can just go with solar, and there's an issue in the line that goes out the back parking lot, so I'm hoping we can just change the fixture and put a solar panel on it and use some natural energy to light that area up. So a little bit more will be done on that as well.
Okay, good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So do we want to discuss anything on the class gift or not tonight?
I mean, didn't they have to have something signed fairly soon? Because it was about the second signee, correct, was one of the questions, and then about the amount of the gift?
It was the accepting the gift, yeah.
Right, the second signing was taken care of,
Okay.
but for now. But it was about the gift.
So, yes, so I had questions.
Okay.
Well, maybe other people did too, but I had questions about the gift. So I know that it's traditional that the class leave money and that it get
Sure.
put back into the building.
Right.
We've been doing that for years.
Right, correct.
So my question just was, did the class, were they aware that they had other options? That they could have done some, because $8,000 is a lot of money.
Well, there's still a bill to be paid, so.
All right, so even if it's
The
five.
third of 3 yearbook bills came in a
Even
couple.
if it was $5,000. My
Fair.
question was just that, in our policy, it says that they could put some of the money into an account for future use, or they could give some of the money to another class, which I wasn't aware of, so that's a good option.
Sure.
Or, again, the traditional leaving the money to,
Right.
for improvements to the high school. So my question just is, did they know that they could do other things?
I'm not in the meeting intentionally, and when they read the policy and vote, I try to stay out of that because I don't want them to vote based on my influence. Not that I try and have an influence on it. So I'm not in there, but I know they have the policy and they talk about it, and it seems like every year they've donated it back to us. But I could certainly speak to the advisor and ask if the whole policy is read or how it's read. But what I get is basically a report from them with the notes, this is what we voted on, and then it's signed by the class officers. I think the concern would be on the students' part is like, who is the guardian of that fund, because if they decided to kind of leave it as an account for the class for future reunions or whatever it may be,
Right.
I think that would be,
They have to have 3 people.
Yeah.
So it has to be 3 people have to be responsible for that money.
but I'd have to really, because I'm not in the room when the vote happens, I'd have to speak to the advisor. But I know they have the policy when they vote. I'm just not sure. I would assume the whole thing is read, but I'm not there.
Right, right.
Jeff?
So it just occurred to me, what's the biggest reason that this, I'll call it a surplus, is generated?
It's honestly generated because the senior class officers, and it's funny because actually I didn't know we were going to be talking about this, but Indy and I'll tell you about our conversation we had. It's generated, believe it or not, majority of it is from fundraising. The senior class advisors and officers always have this fear that they're not going to have enough money at the end of the year to pay their bills. And as you've heard me say, the prom is usually a wash. I mean, they might make a few $100s, they might lose a few hundred, but it pretty much pays for itself. And the one thing that when I met with the class officers the other day, I said, originally the class dues were $180, and we knocked it down to $150 a few years ago. The biggest cost obviously being the yearbook. And I'm hoping we can drop it some more, because I don't think, I think Joyce was pretty close. At the end of the day, it's probably going to be about $5,000 when that last yearbook payment is made. And to me, that's too much money to be given away. And it's tough, with the kids in the spring, they have the prom, they have their class dues, because no one pays them like freshman year. They all wait, and a lot of them don't want to do the fundraising, which could pay for your class dues. Sell one advertisement in the yearbook, it pays for your class dues. So a lot of kids just procrastinate on that. And then in the spring, they've got the prom and the class dues, and May 1st, the deposits due for college. So there's a lot of expenses. So I'm hoping that Indy's the class president, and I'm hoping with him and his officers, we can get together and really look at specifically class of 2022 to see, what were their actual expenses, and really to try and break it down a little bit more to cut that cost to each student.
Perfect answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
So just going forward, can you ensure that all class advisors will
Absolutely.
be familiar with that
And they may
policy?
be doing it already in full disclosure, but I'll make sure if
They
they're
might,
not, they are.
but just to make sure that they know and they let their classes know, because if I were a junior class advisor, I might be saying to the senior class, hey, help us out a little bit, or whatever, how it goes.
Oh, right. No, it makes sense. Especially if the class isn't fundraising as much as these guys are.
Busy schedule this year.
Yes, yes.
And can I just point out that I did not mention the sign, not once.
We're gonna get
shoot.
that, Joe. I'm gonna work with Matt after
No,
this.
I wasn't going to talk about it.
I know, but every time I drive by and see the town sign and look at mine, I get upset,
That was
so.
a strategic non-mentioning of this
Was it?
sign.
He knows what I'm talking about.
I know where she's coming from.
Is that what non-mentioning is?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think
So do we want to make a motion to approve?
The gift.
do we have them?
Approving?
We don't have the number.
We don't have an actual number.
Oh, so you'll come back to
Oh,
us with
'cause
the
it
actual
changed.
number?
I'm sorry, the actual number for?
Well, we have the $8,000 number.
Okay.
That was on our agenda for last week, so
Oh.
we'll wait for you to have a new number.
Yeah, let me pay that last, but traditionally, we waited 6 months, and I think the policy changed to 3 months, or maybe the law changed, so I like the 6 month, because I don't want to get another, we seem to be good on this one, but you never, I like the 6 month, because it seems like we always get that yearbook bill either in August, or they don't get delivered till August, so that's kind of when we get the bill, and the shipping went up a lot, as you can understand, this year.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
And let's see, next up, we have Bonnie LaSorsa for the technology report. And I would say that, Dr. DeAndrea, that I would give principals the right to leave the meeting. I know it's been a long, short week, and got a 4-day weekend coming up, so you are free to leave if you desire. But Bonnie, you have the floor. Thank you.
Do you want Chromebooks? Yeah. You want your Wi-Fi to work? No. I'm sorry. Just kidding. Yeah. So I do have some answers, and I have some concerns, especially about the high school, that I'll share with you. So last year, as part of a class on becoming a certified technical officer, one of my goals was to create a technology plan that met the same criteria as our strategic plan and the same timeline. So this is what I came up with. So this is some quotes from readings that I did, and as well as the vision of a graduate and our district vision. Will you click? So digital convergence is part of our strategic plan. And I have to say, as a math teacher, I had no idea what that really meant and have struggled with it quite a lot. But digital convergence at the end of the day means that our technology makes sense, that it is accessible and transparent, and so that all of our users can focus on their individual goals. So there's a lot of information in that because it goes to the diversity of our inclusion, equity. It sort of hits all of those places, especially when we have a brand new school opening. Digital equity or digital literacy, digital equity, all of those things have new meanings now. So I separated it into 5 areas of focus: professional development, cybersecurity and privacy, and I'm going to add into that because I somehow inherited it, some other security issues, infrastructure, streamline and integrate, and systems. And then this was part of the strategic planning process to sort of think about if-then statements. So if our technology is accessible and transparent, then users will be empowered. If it's vertically aligned to all of our stakeholders, then it will be an equitable experience at all levels. And then personal learning pathways, so that all this is part of and has been part of our evaluation plans, everything we've done, that students have choice, that students have a voice in how they learn, but the same thing is also true for our educators and our administrators and our community. So what I've tried to do is I've separated it into those areas of focus, and the slides in blue are sort of what we're doing going forward, and then the next slide is sort of what we have accomplished in the last year. So cybersecurity is one of the #1 concerns of all IT professionals in schools across the country. And in fact, Bridgewater Wareham was hit last Tuesday with a ransomware attack. Got all the way in to their backups, took out all of their backups. So think about what that means. So one of the things that we've done, we do participate with the town in a statewide grant for cybersecurity training. And if you would like to hear teachers, administrators, secretaries, anybody else whine, just be there on the day that the cybersecurity assignment is released. Comes out 4 times a year. And then they do phishing attacks. In other words, they'll send an email out, and if you click on it, they give you some extra assignments.
Good.
I have to say, when the first time I did it, or the first time I got the information, we had 103 people click on those, and the last time we had 2. And I won't tell you the names, but I have them. It wasn't you, actually.
She learned her lesson.
It's actually been quite amazing how many, over the course of a year, how many emails I get of people saying, is this legit? It's really increased. So we are going to continue to participate with that. I've also started to try to teach people about why we do this, because honestly, as a teacher, I didn't know either. We need 80% participation in the town, and it directly impacts our cybersecurity insurance, which is about $1 million. And I think the thing that convinced a group of actually kindergarten teachers the most was the average downtime in a cybersecurity attack in a K-12 setting is you are down for 3 full weeks. So if you think about 3 full weeks, that's no payroll. That's no internet. That's no phone system at the elementary school. It's no security cameras, no security doors, totally down for 3 weeks. And that's just an average. So we're really working on that. I believe that our technology policies need to be updated to reflect some of that. And I've really been encouraging teachers to include digital literacy. It is part of what we say in our policies, and that it's taught in every class. So the second area of this is data privacy. And again, as a teacher, I heard it, but I didn't really understand the full meaning of this. If you've ever purchased an app that you use a Google logon for, or a Facebook login, or any of those, and when the very first screen that pops up says, this app needs to have access to, well, if you ever read it, a lot of those apps have access to all of your documents and all of your emails. So we're really trying to crack down on that. It was a goal for last year. It's a focus for this year. We're making sure that every application that we use, everything that's requested by a teacher meets a certain standard. And there are some groups that we have that I'm now participating in to help with that as well. And then continue to send out emails about it. And so the third piece here I added was physical security. Part of this we, as a department, sort of inherited because of the technology involved at the new elementary school with the access control system, which is the door scanners and the ID badges and the camera system. So the elementary school has those card readers at almost every door, interior and exterior, and they have 200 and something cameras. And it was installed, and we did have a training, and then Phil Robinson, our network manager, who is a godsend to the district, has helped tremendously. Now, every principal, the police chief, police officers have the cameras on their phones, mobile phones. There was an incident at the elementary school with some vandalism in the parking lot, and they were able to, within a very short period of time, track with that to get the license plate from that. So there's 200 cameras there. So we have gone around and around to look at them and redo them. We've also added cameras at both the both the middle school and the high school. So the other concern after being a part of, and this would be one of my concerns that you asked Scott about the high school, is I do think that the physical security of the high school needs to be upgraded to match what we are doing at the elementary school, or at least closely resemble it. Some of the doors need to be looked at, and we're not at the same level, and when we talk about equity.
Yeah, but where's the middle school in that equation?
The middle school, and I'm going to talk about phones in a minute as well, the middle school's actually in a better place. We put a few more cameras in when the district office moved in, and I don't know that we need them in the interior, but we definitely need to make sure that the exterior doors are a little bit. That's my own personal opinion. So, to that end, after Dr. DeAndrea started, we did have a public safety meeting that included all of the police, fire, both fire onset and Wareham, the town, to start beginning to discuss these. There are some grant funding out there, and of course, Governor Baker's new budget proposal includes physical security. So I'm hoping that there's some grant money there too. So we're going to look at it.
State's swimming in money.
That would be, we just have to get it here.
It's true.
So some of the things that we did this year, we have increased participation in the cybersecurity training. We had a past student come in and review our cybersecurity. He had graduated with a degree in it and just went through. I was new, Phil was new. We'd had almost a complete switch over in the technology department, and we really went through and looked at different systems. We established new protocol for some of the systems. So multi-factor authentication, which is when they send you the code to your cell phone. We have that at the district level. We're still trying to figure out a way to make that work for teachers, only because the time involved to go find your phone to answer that. So we're working on it. We've also increased our password protocols. And I was just as guilty of it. I will say it. I had my password in my classroom taped upon my... I know. I don't do it anymore because Phil would come find me. But really working on making sure that those are much, much tighter. And then we are working with the town. They do have an incident response plan, but it has to be reviewed based upon the new school and the changes in the district as far as buildings. So one of the things that happened with this public safety meeting is that we have a license for a program called Be Safe, and Be Safe came out and they mapped the schools. This was in 2011, and they created those flip books that were in the schools, if you've been in one of the schools, that said all the safety protocols. And in the back of it are these great maps of the school. There's floor plans, and there's It shows you where the water cutoff is and how to disconnect the phones and all of those kinds of things. So we're going, but we've been participating in it for years, but no one seemed to know it. So we reviewed it. We're going to update the middle school and the high school, and we are currently talking about having them come out and map out the elementary school. It is 6 cents per square foot, which is about $9,800. So we're working on that. Professional development. So one of the most important things I think as a department that we can do, and I think what makes an educator in this position a little bit different is that I have a little bit more of an understanding of what a teacher in a classroom would do as opposed to someone that was purely a tech-focused person. So we have been looking at ways to offer technology-based professional development. So we wanted to offer classes this summer, but it was a very short summer, and we were combining 2 schools into one in Power School, which was an interesting thing to do. So based on, we did survey all the schools, and we're looking at what they would like. We're trying to get into as much as possible into staff meetings and PLC meetings and however else we can get into the buildings. And then, like I said, so my goal for next summer is to offer something through the summer. We've worked with the curriculum department, Dr. Schwam, on a professional development plan for this year that actually ties an individual's professional development to what they choose to work on to an extent for this year. And part of that is definitely technology-based. So if you would like to become a Google certified educator, that would be something you could work on this year. And so we've been a part of that conversation. I have a website. I heard that mentioned. It's on my agenda as well, the entire website. But I also created an IT website, a technology website, that once I'd like to get the new policies updated first, but it would be open to district staff, community members, and students, because I really, really, really think we need to educate some parents on technology and students with technology. I'm just not 100% sure how to reach them, so we're working on that as well. We did survey all the schools and asked what they thought about their IT specialists in each school, what we could do better, how could we offer it, how could we get the information out. I did weekly tech tips, which is just an email that goes out to all staff starting in, I believe I started in April, and then I did one last week as well, started it back up. We had an unconference for a January professional development last year, and an unconference is really where you show up, and if you have something to offer, you say, I'm going to teach a class from 10 to 11, and then if people want to go to that class, then they go to that class. Ours was not quite that unstructured. We structured it, but it was the majority were taught by educators. Educators teaching educators, which is the best professional development. We've been meeting regularly with principals and school-based leadership on what we can do, what they need, how can we do it. We changed a great deal about how we handle Chromebooks at the high school based upon what the high school requested. So that's been a major change this year. Students, it is, if you want to go to it, yeah.
I love this.
That's
the coolest thing ever.
So we use a lot of programs. So those are links to all the programs and how to do's for everything. Again, I made it last year. It's not getting used. So I'm working on it.
I did introduce it with all the new teachers, though. So.
Because it's much easier just to email and ask a question.
All our programs are right here. It's a click. I just go and you click. Oh, sorry.
What? Oh.
Everything a staff person needs is right here. You just click and you go. So all the different elements are necessary. You don't have to go logging everywhere and trying to figure out where to go, or email Jamie every 2 seconds asking for where do we get this and where do we get that. It's all right here.
It is.
just beautiful.
I'm going to get back to the other one. Just press slideshow. There you go, and click. So systems. So processes and systems really define how we do business in any business, in any setting. And so when I started the process, what I heard so often coming into it was, well, we always did it that way, and I don't really know why we do it that way, but that's the way we do it. So part of the year was spent really thinking about how we do things and trying to come back and figure out a more efficient way to do it. And so some of the things that we looked at were student and staff technology forms and how they're collected, new student registration, transportation assignments, how do you purchase new software packages, ticketing new staff, exiting staff, anyway. So all of that piece is part of our goal. So we click to the next one. All right. So some of the things that we did to do this. Power School is our system, our student information system. That's where everything there is to know about a student is housed. Google is what we use as a learning system and is the backbone of our network, really, as opposed to Microsoft products. Google is our choice, which is a cloud-based product. Clever is a very nifty tool that will do a couple of things. The first thing it does is that it connects to Power School and it will roster our programs for us. One of the things it did...
Sorry, define that, please.
Okay, so...
Meaning roster our program.
Okay. We use a program at the elementary school called Lexia, which is a reading program, for example. So in the last year, in order to do that, you had to either go in and promote, there has to be a way to go from when they were in second grade in Mrs. Bakeman's class to third grade in Miss Letourneau's class. And you don't want to do that for all 900 students, right? So that's rostering. It's making sure that students and teachers are associated in the right way and that everyone can log in. So as you saw on the slide that Dr. Schramm showed you, we use a ton of programs. So as a teacher in the classroom, I had a note card for every student, and we would write down every single one of their logins because they didn't remember them, and I didn't remember them. And then if they had a question, I would hand it to them, and they'd hand it back to me. And that was the best way. It was fairly private, which is not good, but still. So Clever takes care of that for me. If I roster through Clever, then the student doesn't need a login. They have a login, but they don't need to know it. They just click a button. For our elementary students, starting next week, our K1 and 2 students, they will open their Chromebook because their logins are quite long, your emails. They actually have even an extra piece in there. And they just scan a QR code, and it will take them directly to and it logs them into everything all at once. So that's what Clever does for us. The other thing it does is that it creates our Google Classrooms. It takes a lot of the work off the teacher in having to pull certain students. So it's been a wonderful thing. I had some support hours from a company, and they came in and looked at our Google setup and how we have our devices and users organized. And I'm going to talk about devices in just a minute. We have a new IT ticketing system, and that was actually Jim McKindy who helped purchase that right before I started, where teachers, parents, students will log a ticket, and it says exactly what the device is. Everything's tied to it. It all pulls from Google. It's all integrated together. I have a little bit on the next slide for that. In the spring, we added our facilities ticketing to the same program that keeps our technology tickets. So if your room is too hot, you can put the ticket in the same place as you would put the IT one. We have an asset management system. So what that means is that if a student leaves the district to go someplace else and doesn't return a Chromebook, they can online deactivate that Chromebook and it won't work. It's just like your phone. If you've ever lost your phone, it says, "This is the property of Wareham Public Schools, please return it." And it won't work at all. And you can't get around it either. It allows us to make sure that we know exactly what we have and where we have it. We changed some of our IT personnel. Pretty much everybody's new except for Jimmy Cannon, thank heavens, and Robin Westberg in the central office. We just hired we have 2 at the elementary school. We have Tim Connolly at the high school, and then Jimmy's at the middle school and district office. Power School registration, that's a new program that's running so that students can register online. And then this is probably my most important and exciting news. We have recently signed a contract and issued a purchase order for a program called Droplet. And would you switch slides? Because I think I have a slide about Droplet. This is about ticketing. Nope, go back to the other one. We'll do ticketing first. So this is sort of what we see in Incident IQ, which is our ticketing system. So my goal is, because in my view, IT specialists are customer service, my goal is that they respond to a ticket within 1 hour. And maybe that response is, I can't get to it today, but this is what I'm going to do. We have not been there this last week in any shape or form, but we're getting there, and it's getting much better. The other thing that we're really, really trying to get, this is from February, trying to get teachers to understand is that if they put a ticket in, then we know sort of where the problems are. Like, are the HP Chromebooks that we purchased, are we having more issues with broken screens than we would have on Lenovo or another brand? We're tracking all of that information now to try and make the best decisions that we can, especially financially.
Can I just ask, do teachers trust the ticket system, or do they go to individual people in the building still?
They do both. Yeah.
So you're trying to encourage them to trust the ticket system, but that's going to take some time.
Absolutely.
Culture change.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And to be fair, and I know what it's like to be in front of 25 kids looking at me with a lesson planned and my computer doesn't work. I get it. In that moment, they take precedence.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's a phone call, then what I've said to my IT specialists is, then you put the ticket in afterwards, so that we've tracked it. But and I think this is probably the best example, one of the questions we ask on all of our interviews is, if you have a student that can't log in, a principal who needs help with something, with a PowerPoint, or a teacher whose computer doesn't work, what do you do? Where do you go? And the answer is, it's always you go to the teacher with 30 kids in front of you, and then you help the student, and then you, okay, they've left. And then you go help the administrator. So it's a very slow process.
So I appreciate the phone call that says I can't do anything about it right now, and I think that's an important phone call. But it seems to me the third graph is far more important than the second graph. In other words, getting the phone call, that's nice, but how long is it taking to actually solve my problem is far more important than the phone call in general. So what is your goal for that third graph? Because that graph looks pretty impressive.
You have to think about the timing of that graph, though,
all right,
as
then
well.
Forget that graph. What is your goal for resolution time?
Well, my goal is within 24 hours.
Okay.
But It all depends on what it is. So, for example, I had an email today, as opposed to a ticket, from a teacher asking about a login for a system, right? And the fact is that that system, that program, still sees us as Minot and Deacon's and not Wareham Elementary School, so I can't roster it yet. So if I put a time limit on that, like that's not in my control, so I can't roster students at the elementary school until I can get, right, and there's a lot of that. There's a lot of tickets from parents where a child has a broken screen, and there are some steps that have to be taken before that ticket is truly resolved. So,
Fair point, but it still seems to me, then you go to the big boss and you say, I can't meet my goal because of this impediment. And it's the big boss's job to eliminate that impediment so you can achieve your goal.
and while I respect,
If that's his goal, yes, you're right, if that's his goal.
well, I have no doubt his goal, part of his goal is not to have happy staff members or students, but again, there are parts of that are not in his control. Like I have to wait in that particular
Well,
situation.
then he goes to Kevin and blames Kevin.
But I don't think Kevin can make National Geographic Connect change my school names, right? You know what I mean? It all depends on what the situation is, so. All right, Droplet. So if you've talked to me in the last, this is my favorite thing that's gonna happen in this very near future. So we started looking at, because I was seated in the multi-service center next to the registrar, and I heard all of the information about new staff. Principals want new staff to have all of their technology and all of their access on the day that they start. That makes sense. And they want it on the day after they hire them. But there again, there's a bunch of steps that have to take place. And that process, I heard it happening over and over again last year about that human resources process. And there's a lot of steps. We, as a technology department, our part of it is we cannot put someone into Power School until we have sign off by payroll. And until we can put them in Power School, we can't give them an email. And if we can't give them an email, we can't give them a laptop, and we can't put them in systems, and you get the idea. So I started looking originally at products that we already have that have a human resources component to it. We looked at 3 different options from Power School. We looked at Incident IQ. We looked at Frontline ASOP, which is who does our absence management system. And we looked at one more. Anyway. And then I found Droplet. And so what Droplet does, they are based out of Utah. They have a large presence in the western part of the country, is they will take your forms and they will create your forms and your workflow to your specification. And they gave us a tremendous deal. And as we started talking to them, if all we used them for was human resources, then it probably would not have been a fiscally responsible idea. But we can integrate at the least what we now use for absence management and subs, and teacher evaluation and professional development tracking, all into one product. Forecasted out, we will save approximately $13,000 a year once we can do this, and we will be adding the human, and that is adding the human resources products, which we don't currently have. So in my mind, basically, it would almost be like the way Power School looks for students. It would be like that for an employee. Everything would be in one place, which would make my bookcase on the other slide much smaller. So we're really excited. The contract and the purchase order came through this week. And
I have to admit, I'm shocked that in 2022, this isn't routine. I mean, think about this. This shouldn't be a big deal in 2022, and yet I believe you that it is.
We're really excited to begin working with them, and we're designing our own system, or not me. All right. Ready?
I just want
Oh.
to say one thing. But what's cool about Droplet, that's different about the other companies that we looked at, was that we don't have to acquiesce to their system. They create the system based on what we give them. So we can keep our processes that we have in place currently, our forms, the way that we go about doing things, and it's unique to us, and we have these processes in place for a reason, and we don't want to acquiesce necessarily to the way somebody else has created a form. And so not only is it a great deal, and they'll maintain us for life for a very short money, which is phenomenal. Like, you never get that. I don't know how we pulled that off, but they're going to do all of that for us, and it will still maintain our spirit of Wareham and who we are, right? Which so that it doesn't take that away. It's pretty cool.
All right, can you get the next one? So this sort of falls in the same idea, but streamlining things and integrating things. We talked about professional development and software packages and websites. I would like to create a system where teachers could request a program, an app, or an extension. We're looking at either purchasing or creating a data and analytics product of some sort, so that we could look at how grades tie to absence, there's a lot of ways to look at that. Evaluation of products, how do we do that? What are we looking at? And then the last part there is really to begin communicating some of this information and sharing it with other people. All right, will you click? So this year, some of the things that have happened, we now have an inventory of all of our devices in the district, which was not happening when I started. Chromebooks are not out in the kindergarten classrooms, but they're out 1 through 12, and they are one-to-one. Every single student has a Chromebook, and it is assigned to them. And my goal is, I handed one to a 9th grader, and he said to me, he goes, this is all scratched. It looks like the one I had last year. And I was like, well, it is the one you had last year, because last year it was brand new, so the scratches are yours and will be till you're a senior. And I sort of grinned, but.
Love that response.
Yeah, yep. He did not. But, so, I mean, we need a plan, because a lot of Chromebooks were purchased, and I have a slide for this, as far as financially where we're at as far as devices are concerned. A lot of things were purchased in the last couple years, and they're going to run out of time. And so I think we need a plan about what we're going to need to buy and when we're going to need to buy it. Lot of buildings closed, and we have really looked at existing phone and internet contracts, decreased costs by almost $2,000 a month on just those utility lines, just by closing some of them and reviewing them. And I know this came up last week as far as what obsolete means and what happens. So we cleared, inventoried, deemed obsolete, and recycled any device that is considered functionally obsolete, meaning a Chromebook is functionally obsolete when we can no longer update it. And Chromebooks, as part of their design, come with an auto update expiration date. They have been 5 years. My understanding is that the brand new ones are 8 years. So at the end of 5 years, they cannot be updated, and that makes them a security risk for our students. And that's why we deem them obsolete. And once they're at that point, we cannot, in good conscience, give it to a student to use, because it's not safe for them. Other items, it depends on what it is. I, in cleaning out the room where we are now, found 5¼ inch floppy disks. So if that is functionally obsolete and now part of the computer museum at the elementary school, just saying. Apple headphones are another one. Like, I don't know about you, but I think I have 12 pairs in my drawer at home. And new iPhones you can't plug them into anything unless you get the little adapter thingamadoogie. But so we're really looking at equipment and talking about functionally obsolete. When we got the big new touch view panels and all, every teacher classroom in this district has them now, that makes the projectors obsolete, functionally obsolete. They still work, some of them. But they are no longer, we don't need them. And I'll talk about that. So I put this together last year. So what happens with obsolete, and we had trailers full of technology. There are several electronics recyclers out there. We use one, and they're wonderful. And so if it's deemed obsolete, it goes in front of the school committee. Once it's marked that way, then we were contacting 2 different companies. So I found this very exciting program called Planet ROI. They would take our Chromebooks, they had this magic bullet, and it would extend the life of the Chromebooks, and then they were going to come back to Wareham. They sold me on it. We sent them 900 Chromebooks last year. And this year when I talked to him, he was like, well, we won't take them if the auto update has happened, has expired. And I was like, but that was the whole point. And he said that Google had changed their policy, that it would only allow them to extend that update by 3 months, and so it didn't make sense. So Data Recycling of New England is who I use, the Northeast is who I use the most, and they give us about $2 per Chromebook. Yeah. But it's something. It's something.
What do they do with them?
Well, so one of the things they do is they do certify that all hard drives and any storage devices are destroyed, properly destroyed. That's a big deal. And then they recycle them, and they go to a company that makes them into something else. And I talked to the guy, but, so it's not thrown away. It does all go through the right channels. Go ahead. All right, so this is what we have planned for right now. We have an E-rate project out there that will upgrade and reorganize the network at the middle school and move some of the network servers from the middle school to the high school. And it was supposed to have been done last Columbus Day, and it is still back ordered. So that is paid for. Our E-rate projects are funded at 85%. That's about a $105,000 project. E-rate for this year, this current year, we are going to do some new firewalls and power supplies at both the middle school and the high school. And if you've ever been to the high school, they have in some classrooms network servers with all of the cables hanging out in the middle of the classroom in these wooden cabinets, and those are going to be replaced with metal secure cabinets that tucks everything in. And air conditioners were installed in both the MDF room and the IT room at the high school. That was done through ESSER funds. That was just finished recently. To give you an idea, the MDF, which is where everything at the most important part of a network is at the high school, that room I was up there one day was 94 degrees. And if you know electronics, it's really dangerous. So the next future projects is Phil's wish list. He'd like to replace our sonic wall firewalls. That's what blocks students and why some students at the high school do not think our Wi-Fi doesn't work. One of my wish lists, the phone systems at both the middle school and the high school need to be replaced. They are not E911 compliant, which means that if you call 911 from a classroom at the high school, the E911 would know that call came from the high school. and they may know that it was in sort of this part of the building. The new law states that they need to know exactly. So at the elementary school, if you call 911, they know what classroom it is, where it is in the building, and all the information about it. That needs to happen. To give you an idea, I had a couple of quotes done, and 2 estimates so far. One was for 80,000 and one was for 130, is where those were. That cost mandates it'll have to go out to bid on combis. So we're working on that. We're also talking to Zoom phones this week about it. We'd like to increase our 1 gig fiber up to 10 gig. And this is going to happen in the next few weeks. They're going, when facilities and fields and grounds moved into what was the old Boys and Girls Club, at that time we could not get internet to that building from what we have at the middle school. So we need an antenna put onto the middle school that would, and anyway, and we're going to put in a card reader there as well. That should be happening within the next month. That will allow us to drop our Comcast internet subscription at that building. And then devices, the Chromebooks have a 5-year life cycle. Every teacher, educator, and administrator got a new laptop last fall. And so we need to think about, I mean, there's also there's a lifespan on those as well.
Will
So,
the 8-year models be more costly?
you know, I saw that on a webinar, or heard it on a webinar, and none of the ones I have seen yet are advertising that. So I don't even know if they're available yet. And yes, they would be more costly. So I'm not going to go through all of it. We opened the schools. Everything that could be used from DECUS, we have moved around. Same with the multi-service center. Phil is amazing, and he has done a great job at really streamlining what we have done. So Wi-Fi, a really popular conversation at the high school. So we have 3 networks. This was not happening before. WPS internal is a super secret network, and it is any district-owned device. I don't have the password for it. I can't get on it. It's the only people that have it are Phil and Jimmy, and that's the way it should be. So I give them my Chromebook. There are no personal devices on that network at all. There are no phones, nothing. So then what we did, when we began to look at the Wi-Fi problems at the high school, we found that a lot of our bandwidth was being taken with Facebook and TikTok and Netflix on, we think, cell phones. So that is all blocked now across the district. And he's got different levels. We have both 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz. The housing development, so the houses that are behind the high school, I guess we're borrowing a lot of it. So they can't do that anymore. He's done a great job and I'll show you one of the heat maps, at really looking at what we have and where we have it. So any personal device is on the guest network. And most things are blocked from that. You cannot go on Netflix, you cannot go on Facebook, you cannot go on TikTok or Instagram or any of those things. They're all blocked. Because that's what was taking up the bandwidth.
That's what people were complaining.
Yeah.
They couldn't get online.
Yeah. So at the staff request, we created an intermediate level for staff cell phones. I feel incredibly strongly that staff should have access to their cell phones. It's just really important. Things happen. And at least at the middle school, I know for sure I have no cell service any place in the building. So staff is allowed to use personal devices, and there are some other options. It's not nearly as tightly defined as the guest one is. Again, we had a password for our internet system, and it was on almost every teacher's board at the middle school. It was Viking One Connect with I's were ones and zeros were O's, and you probably knew that, didn't you?
I knew that.
Yeah. All you had to do is one teacher tell it to one student, and every student knows.
It's actually tradition. The
Yeah.
upperclassmen would tell the lower ones.
Yeah. So now, if you would like to get on the WPS staff network, we have QR codes, and you can scan the QR code, and that's how you get on. I don't know that one either. And like I said, I'm okay. We do have network connections between all the schools. The Boys and Girls Club building, we're working on that one. And then the McDuffie Center, which is the old cooperative or the annex where Turning Point is. He's really increased firewall security settings, and he's consolidated the network down into fewer places. So this is one, just this, and again, this is February. We spent days watching this. This is how the Wi-Fi is being used throughout the building. So just recently, so if you watch in the morning, that big orange spot going in that front door, that says children or students and teachers, I guess, are walking in that front door and trying to get on the internet. Yep. Right as they enter the building. And so we would have people say, oh, I can't get on at 8 o'clock in the morning. Well, that's because everybody's trying to join in that one place. And they actually ended up taking some of the access points down and moving them to different locations so it would force them to go further in. It's been fairly, and they continue to do this. In fact, they just moved a bunch, or last week moved the access points over in the portables because JROTC was having a hard time. Devices. So we received 500 Chromebooks last year as part of an ECF grant. The ECF grant is Emergency Connectivity Fund, and it is entirely about students having access at home and 24/7. So we gave those to our current third graders, fourth graders, and fifth graders have those. All students grades 3 through 12 take their Chromebooks home. We let high school students choose, 9th through 12th grade, or through 11th graders choose to keep their Chromebooks over the summer as well, which we had never done before. And we had one issue from someone who kept a Chromebook over the summer, which is, I think, amazing. That's not what we had anticipated. So students in our first and second grade classes keep them at school, and this year they are one-to-one. There is a Chromebook assigned to every student in first grade and second grade, and what's different from here, and kindergarten. So all kindergartners, first graders, and second graders have their own Chromebook at school. We still have iPads, some iPads floating around at the elementary school in particular. So the next round of the Emergency Connectivity Fund, I applied for iPads for kindergarten students to take home and have at home, not to bring back and forth because that didn't work, so that they would have access at home. I met with the kindergarten teachers and they said, why are you going to do that if they're using Chromebooks at school? Would rather them have Chromebooks. We have not ordered them yet, but I do have funding for about 285 additional Chromebooks, and they would be for families who do not have a device available at home for students. So that's, and then after 3 years, we can use them in the district as well. We also, that funding pays for hotspots. We have about 300 hotspots available for students. We participate in a program called Bridge to Broadway, that should say broadband, in April, and I'll show you that in just a moment, what we found out. And then new this year is a program called the Affordable Connectivity Program. All of our students, because we are a CEP free lunch school district, qualify for this program. It gives families $30 off per month broadband services. Both Comcast and Verizon have plans so that it would be free, and you get $100 off a device as well. So letters went home, I think, at all 3 schools on that first day of school packet about how to do it with an eligibility letter. I do understand that to apply for it is rather complicated. And so we're looking at a way. They don't do it through us, they do it through the state, so. We did put those touch view screens in all the classrooms, middle school, the high school, and the elementary school, and then all district teachers. So again, speaking to the equity, we're really trying to work on that. All right, go to the next one. Everyone's getting tired. All right. Bridge to broadband data. What this did, we sent them all of our information from Power School of all of our students to see, without names, to see who actually had internet access at home and who had it, who didn't have it, and who couldn't have it. And what it came back with is that 71% of our students, this is last year, of our households, 71% of our households currently have internet access at home. 12% had internet available and were not taking advantage of it, or were not purchasing it. But there was 17% of our population who do not have it available at their house. And I was shocked by that number. And it has a map. So what we can do now with this information is they sent it back to us. We can now match what they sent us with names, and we can go to the family as opposed to having the families come to us. So we're working on that. This is the affordable connectivity.
Sorry, can you give an example of why the internet is not available?
I believe, and I asked that question as well, but I believe if you are maybe living in a hotel or are homeless, or there are some streets actually, like I have a map that shows me like with little dots.
17%?
So what happened to those students during the pandemic?
I don't know.
You did have hotspots? Thank you. Okay.
I understand, but that's the 12%. It's the 17% that it's literally not available, even if.
They can't get it.
They can't get it.
So in our town, it's either Comcast or, in Wareham, it's Comcast or Verizon. And Comcast and Verizon do not offer service at that location based upon the addresses.
That's a staggering number.
I was surprised too. I was surprised too. All right, yep. All right, so this is, based on what we have right now, this is what I think should happen. We do not have any Chromebooks that will expire. We had 667 that expired in June of '22. We do not currently have any that will expire in June of '23 or June of '24. But that said, we do have ones that are broken or things happen. So I do think that we will need to purchase some probably next school year. 24-25, we have 700 Chromebooks that will expire at an approximate cost right now of $214. Well, you can see them.
Is this net of grants, or this is?
Does not include grants, because I can't.
It assumes no grants.
It assumes no grants.
But is that a reasonable assumption?
You know, I've heard that the ECF, they have a new round coming out, but.
Okay, so this is worst case.
Yep, that's worst case. So.
Excuse me?
It's a good setup.
Set up for what?
See the worst, and then
Oh.
and then when it's great, you're happy.
So when.
That's one way of looking at it.
So, and this is Chromebooks, this is not laptops, which is which is educator devices. When you ask about concerns, this is a concern because I can't possibly have that in my budget, and the phone systems. So those would be my two big ones. And that's it. Sorry, I know it was long.
Don't apologize.
Questions?
Thank you. Any questions? Jeff?
I'm not putting you on the spot. I'd just like an overall reaction as new to the district. Not to the quality of the presentation, which was excellent, but to the content, what was your reaction to the content of this presentation?
Well, I think it's appropriate content for what we're dealing with.
No, I mean in terms of, are you surprised the district has this functionality? Should it have more? Are you surprised it has as much as it has? I mean, what is your overall reaction to the level of technology?
It's higher than it's been, than my experience in other districts.
Higher than it's, okay.
Yeah. So I like the fact that we're addressing and I've spoken with Bonnie about this, about the security of our data, of our systems, and they're on it. They're ahead of other districts I've been in. So I'm very pleased.
Okay, thank you. The other question is, I almost want to apologize for this question, but when you talk about an employee being a godsend or wonderful or whatever, I have a negative reaction to that, because I wonder if there's redundancy for that competency, so that we're not up a creek without a paddle if that person ever decides to leave.
So there are, I'm trying not to say names, but,
I don't need names.
I'm a pretty organized person, and when I started, I could not find things. I just wanted a list of who has what and where it is, and it did not exist. And I wanted a list of how do I do something, and so that is something, so one of the things I did is that everyone in my department has to set goals, just like every educator in this district does, and they will be evaluated on those goals and on certain, and I mean, in lack of something else, I made up my own and shared it with them, and we discussed it. Like, it's an amazing group of people, but there's some knowledge there that is nowhere else. Phil Robinson is one of them.
That's the feeling I get.
There's a lot of people out there. But one of the things he did, if you come into our office, he's created a little learning lab so that any of the IT specialists who want to come over and learn about networks and what he does and how he does it, he's going to teach them. And that, I didn't ask him to do that. He just did that. Another, Robin Westberg, who does all of our data, is our data systems coordinator. What she knows about PowerSchool, I don't know how we would have made it through the summer, combining two schools and an upgrade with PowerSchool and all the rest. That's something that we absolutely need to figure out. What are we going to do with scheduling in the schools and having people know how to do that? Like, those people who have always done it are not. I don't want her to say anytime soon, but
I've expressed my concern.
yes,
I hear you.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
I have a new grandson who's actually on an airplane on the way here right now, and so I have a time limit here as far before retirement. I want to make sure that when I leave it with everything in place. That you know where it is, that everything's transparent, we have a plan going forward. You know how much money I'm going to ask you for in the next 5 years to make it work.
And I guess my only point is hopefully also with some redundancy, cross-training, et cetera,
Yep.
so that we're not beholden to one person.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Joyce?
Quickly, I just want to say, I don't have a question. I just want to say it was such a great comprehensive report. I learned a lot when I read it, and I learned even more tonight.
Thank you.
So thank you very much for taking the time to do that.
Indiana?
Hi.
Hi.
Okay, so I have a couple questions, sorry. I guess, like, looking at the last few slides, I'm wondering, and maybe this has just never been explained to me, but why, is there a specific reason why we use Chromebooks for students instead of laptops if there's an expiration date on them?
Cost.
Okay.
I mean, at the end of the day, cost. So
Yeah.
a Chromebook is $250, and the laptops that we bought for teachers were $1,600.
No.
I mean, and we can't ask. I have mixed feelings as far as students bring their own devices, because I think that intensifies equity issues, and so
Yeah.
I don't feel that that's, plus when students bring their own devices, we have no control over it, and we do. So they can log on to any Chromebook anywhere remotely and fix it, or any laptop, and so that's why.
So that was my next question, actually. So I have this computer
Yep.
that I use throughout the school day. I personally am not a fan of the Chromebooks. They don't work for me. Maybe it's the size and my fingers don't work on the keyboard. I don't know what it is, but I prefer this. And I would say probably about a fifth of every class I'm in uses their own device too, or a fourth, whatever. So and we connect to the guest Wi-Fi. And I would say the biggest problem is the YouTube, where like we've had assignments from teachers that they post on YouTube and we can't watch the videos.
Yep. So it's unless every student would allow Wareham Public Schools to manage your personal device, we can't keep our network safe if you're in the same place as our data. At the end of the day, that's the answer to that. Could we create another level there? Maybe. And I would love to have a team of students at the high school to talk about tech issues with. I would love to have a team of students at the high school who would, if they broke their Chromebook, agree to learn how to fix them, as opposed to, like Mr. Palladino and I have talked about it. We're just not quite there yet. The issue is, how do we know that the Chromebooks that are on YouTube are using YouTube for the good and not for the evil?
Right.
That's the issue.
Okay.
If you be glad to work on a way around it.
Definitely. Would love to talk to you more about it. And lastly, at the beginning you talked about an events calendar on the website, and I just want a little more about that and how that would work.
So it's on there now. It was Mrs. Bakyaki's idea, I think, last year. I would like to completely redo the website, personally. It just is not something that we could have done last year. There are some laws about websites that I didn't realize before, as far as accessibility and ADA compliance and how it's backed up and all those kinds of things, that we were working on. I've asked if there's a class at the high school, a website design class. I would love students to design it, but there's got to be some checks and balances with that.
Right.
So that events calendar is on there. Anybody can send information to Robin Westberg, and she will put it out there
Thank you.
with the superintendent's approval.
Thank you, Bonnie. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
And, yes, enjoy your grandchild. Next up, we have Eric, Facilities Manager. Thank you.
How is everyone?
Good evening.
We're sorry it's so late for your sake.
That's all right, short and sweet. Get right through this, we'll be done. We can go for the facility side before the MSBA side. Currently, with the elementary school, we're just trying to shake out all the bugs. I'm sure you guys hear how many bugs we have in that building, but that's just kind of where we stand there. So I don't know if you guys all have the list that I sent in with that packet too, right? So just going over, so we have ongoing issues with each school. So the idea for the elementary school, since it's brand new, just trying to get the bugs out and make sure that building's maintained and stagnant. The middle school and high school, our focus is to bring them up to par. As far as maintenance, that mentality of just wait until something breaks, we're trying to get rid of that. So now I'm here, we have Robbie, our HVAC tech, we have Mike Linehan, our plumber. So we've had them for a year now. So the focus is to maintain these buildings as best we can, be preventative. We have stock items, that way if something breaks on the fly, we're right there. We don't have to really worry about it. So the issues that we're running with now is that I don't think we've ever taken these preventative maintenance before. It's usually something breaks, we address it. So now we're looking to water treatment throughout the school, so we have the right pH running through all the HVAC equipment. That way we don't have valves rotting out, things like that. And the challenge is we didn't appropriate those funds for it. So I'm sure the building principals aren't too happy with me when they look at their maintenance accounts and they see that they're getting drained right off the bat. But we want to do every year, implement a maintenance plan. So change air filters, change belts on rooftop units and things like that too. So yeah, we can go into the list a little bit. So ongoing for the middle school, we have, I'm waiting on lead time for fire door replacement. Cybercom, there's a repeater in the basement that's to enhance communications with the fire department. It's obsolete. So the focus now is to find the funds to have that replaced. It needs to be replaced every 10 to 15 years. The elementary school has their own BDA system, which was expensive, but it won't ever need to be replaced. So this was at the time, maybe 10, 15 years ago. The idea was just to not spend so much money up front, but for the idea of spend $8,000 to $10,000, 10 years, do it again, kind of just keep it going. At the middle school as well, we just replaced over 300 LED tubes throughout the building. So I believe we had a grant program a couple years ago that changed fluorescence over to LEDs. But the problem with the company was that they just changed the bulbs. It all depends on who you talk to. But from what I'm understanding is that they changed the bulbs about the ballast too. So they're not compatible and they keep burning out. So the idea now is to put direct voltage tubes in. That way we bypass the ballast altogether. In the future, we can just order the bulbs, have a custodian take that one out, pop one in. Easy. So every year we're gonna see this because they're gonna keep burning out, the ones that we haven't replaced, but each year we keep making big chunks to that to make sure the lighting's all upgraded there. High school right now, we have a rooftop unit that cools and heats the cafeteria area. The compressor was shot. What really needs to happen is it needs to be replaced, but we're looking at $250,000 to do that. So for now, to hold us over for a couple years, we pinpointed it's just the compressor. The coils look fine. The heat still works. The air ventilation to take the air out, circulate air, still works. It's just that compressor to pump the refrigerant and the chilled water down there. So the crane was here yesterday. They installed it. I believe they were supposed to be here this morning to troubleshoot it, and it should be good. But that's where we stand with the buildings now as far as maintenance.
Can I ask at the high school about the auditorium lighting?
Yes, you
what
can.
What are the issues and what's the plan going forward?
So the issue is, it's a system that was never been changed since '91. So we have a dimming system with all those lights tied into that is obsolete. It needs to come out. Everything needs to come out. All the lights, stage lights, that whole dimming system. It's expensive to do. So I think the focus temporarily is to put what I put in there. So the original bulbs over the house lights for 500 watt bulbs, they would replace them with 250 watt halogens. But the LED lights that are in there right now, they're still tied in to the dimming system, but they won't dim. So it's either we replace them with a bright light that you could never see everything, or if you have a play, that's not really what we're looking for. So it's trying to find a light in the middle, not too dark, not too bright. So that's just a temporary solution. I know we had something on the 24th that we had to get done in time. It's a $4,000 fix. What we could do is a $13,000 fix, which is actually to remove all those fixtures over the stage, over the seats. But then again, now you're rewiring, you're going off the dimming system. So if you ever had any hopes to revamp that auditorium, you just pretty much kind of did that for nothing, because now you have all new lights and they're on and off switch only. So that's where we stand now. I know that there's talk about looking into grants. The Community Preservation Act, I think, is one of them, that a teacher reached out to me. So I gave them all the information that I had as far as whatever procurement I did, looking to see what would happen. I did have a company called Barbizon come out to give us a full estimate on everything. Take everything out, put everything new back in. I'm waiting on it, but she told me around 200 to 250,000 to do that. So with that, obviously, it has to go out to public bid, so it's not something that just happens like that.
Right.
But that's why the lights are the way they are right now.
Okay.
When I walked in last year, there was 2 out of the 14 working. So the push was to have a lighting consultant come out and do kind of, be like the OPM on the project. Give us the schematic design of what we need to do. I presented it, but I got crickets in return, so I just kind of walked away from it. Okay. When I first started, I had a lot of other projects to go on too, and that wasn't like the main focus. So that's where the lights are right now.
So there probably will be no town meeting in the auditorium for a while.
We
Is that
did
what I'm-
meet, and I don't think so. We can put other lights in there to brighten it up, but we have other options too. The elementary school is nice. It'd be a good time to show it off. We have a lot of chairs that we can bring there as well. But yeah.
Okay. April?
Are there any grants from like theater companies or like Broadway in Boston or things like that that might be able to be looked at for, or I don't know if they have, because it is a theater setting, and I know that the Viking Theater Group does a lot throughout the year. They do, I think, at least 3 performances, where maybe there might be some sort of room where, I don't know if they, I mean, if that's ever been looked into to try to get grants for the lighting, because it is used for drama programs.
Not to my knowledge, but that's an avenue that we can always look down. Yeah, for sure. It needs to be done, obviously, but it's just finding the funding sources to do things like that, so. That's it for facilities, so, oh wait, there's one more thing too, I forgot. So, as Bonnie was saying, the idea is to know next year what we should plan for as far as appropriating money. So after speaking with the superintendent, I believe the main focus is to have kind of a list of a preventative maintenance plan, so that not each school is doing their own thing. We all follow this, all uniform, check the buildings, change air filters every 6 months, things like that. Inspections all in the same time every year. That way we're just constantly moving, not just sporadic between our 3 schools. So that's something that we will be implementing soon. I just have to go through and find all the inspections of each school to make sure that we're all on the same timeline. But
So it'll be systematic then, basically?
correct, yeah. So we know that in June or July, 6 months, time to change the filters, time to change the belts, time to do a once-over on the outside, make sure everything's fine. I didn't know anything about the high school exterior doors until today, so now that's on my agenda as well, but we'll get on that too. Any
Thank you.
questions?
I think it's a really good idea to be able to have that
Yeah.
maintenance plan going forward.
So I'm right now heavily involved with the elementary school, middle school, and high school. They do their own thing as well, but I generally help with bigger procurements for those schools. I like to be involved with every part of those schools, kind of like I am with the elementary school. So I think that this preventative checklist will ensure that we're all on the same page, we're all moving forward correctly. That way I know, hey, I need this much for next year. So just have that ready, you know. Instead of surprise, I'm taking everything from your account.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jeff?
So just for certainly my edification and perhaps others, what does your department org chart look like?
What do you mean? I'm sorry.
For whom are you responsible? How many people are in your department?
Who I oversee?
Yes.
So when I was hired as a facility supervisor. Shortly after, Stephen Ramsey was hired as the Fields and Grounds supervisor. So he oversees the Fields and Grounds department, which consists of 3. I oversee the HVAC and plumber and the custodians to an extent, make sure that they do everything correct.
So you have a solid or a dotted line to the custodians?
Solid.
Solid.
Yeah, I think so. Yep. So
That wasn't a qualitative statement. I mean, are you responsible for the custodians as compared to the principals?
This is going back to each school. It's kind of different, I guess. Some have more control, but in theory, yes, it would be custodians, me, then the principal. So I would be the middleman between the custodians. I deal with them directly, and then I deal with the principals on the other side.
If the principals had a big problem with the head custodian, they would come to you?
It would be addressed with me, yep.
Okay.
I would definitely be involved, that's for sure.
Okay. So you have a lot of responsibility, and 2 of those guys never existed before.
Correct.
And I can tell you that people in the district, employees in the district, are very much aware of those people, that they exist, both in a good way and a bad way, because they cost money, okay? They're paid a salary.
Yep.
By the way, so there are 3 ways to look at what you're doing. You could hire people to do what they're doing, which you've done. You have people under contract to do preventative maintenance, repairs, etc. Or you could do what was routinely done, which is wait for things to break, right?
Correct.
Then pay the cost of fixing them, okay? Do we have any kind of analysis that would be compelling, that would say the current setup is in fact saving us money?
I have looked into it, and just for the last couple of years, even just the HVAC side alone, I'll refer to my notes and talk to the superintendent about it before I...
This is called a softball, because I believe in what you're doing, just so that you know.
Oh,
okay?
Thanks.
So the analysis you've done so far, is the superintendent aware of it? Who's aware of this analysis?
The superintendent in the past was aware of it. It was just something that I wanted to focus for things like this, so to show their worth here, because they are very valuable here. Just a couple of years with just one HVAC company, we're at $300,000 with them alone. 1 year. So if their salary plus, the thing about them as well is that you have companies that come in, and we've seen it. They don't do what they've said that they did on their work, and they charge us for it. Or because no one's really monitoring what they're actually doing. So they say that they switch out a valve, they never even touch that valve. Well, they cut out all this insulation, then they walked away. So then we have a bigger problem after that. It's just hack jobs, essentially. And
Bottom line is, I'm asking this question because I want the world to know
correct.
that what we're doing is far superior than what we used to do, and is saving money at the same time.
So to answer that question, we're working on it.
Okay, so I applaud what you're doing, and I hope a lot more people besides myself are applauding what you're doing.
Okay.
Just FYI.
Yep. And like I said, I'll refer to the superintendent too, with everything. I just pulled old warrants just to see what we're looking at.
As you get involved, for example, in the budget process, and you can, I'm sure Kristen will become an advocate for you too, okay? Because any of those kind of, this is what we used to spend, this is what we're spending now, and guess what? We have better quality.
Correct.
Better reliability, et cetera, et cetera. It's all good. Thank you.
2 days ago was my 1-year anniversary here. So when I first started, it was, we need this, and the focus was getting these buildings up, to actually sit back and look.
The maintenance schedule.
It makes sense, and that's what we just want everything to be uniform. That way we're not all over the place. It makes my job a lot harder too.
Amen. Thank you for being here.
Any more questions with the facility side?
Nope.
I don't have a question. I just want to quickly say that, like Jeff said, we've been criticized in the past for not doing preventive maintenance. You know, when we talk about schools and things like, and building new schools and doing improvements. So what you're doing is really important, so.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
The big focus was even with the MSBA, the first thing that they asked for initial documentation is, do you have a preventive maintenance plan? It's like, no. But with
now
that
you
and
will, so,
with
yeah.
Incident IQ, as far as the tech now, it's with facilities as well, it helps a lot. We can see all the issues when they come up and address them. A lot of them are just, my room's too cold, my room's too hot. But we address them accordingly, so.
By the way, just quick follow-up. Bonnie has this ticketing system with resolutions and all that kind of stuff. Do you have a similar system?
It's the same exact system. Same
Yeah,
exact.
she showed it.
Literally, it's
Yeah.
one system and it just depends on where it goes?
Categories, yep.
Got it.
Yep,
Thank
so
you.
either the tech or you go to facilities, click on that, it breaks to a whole bunch of
Perfect.
different categories, then you pick what your issue is, plumbing, electrical, custodian cleanup.
Great.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right, we can go right into the MSBA. So schematic design is all set. Tomorrow, I should have the full cost estimate of what each project is going to cost overall. The reimbursement rate is 71.58%. It's a good number. So the boilers is pretty straightforward. We have 6. Oh, let me back up a little bit. So MSBA will fix anything within the 4 walls of the boiler room. They will not go outside. Our current building is pneumatic, literally off and on. Our elementary school has a BMS, so it's a control system that I can literally go on my laptop and make any adjustments I need to. The focus would be to do that, and these boilers will be equipped to do that, but that's just a conversation for another time, I guess, because that the MSBA will not reimburse anything without that, outside those 4 walls. So 6 boilers we have currently, 91 rusted and falling apart. They've lived their life, and 3 of them are still really working, but it's time that they go. We're going to have major problems there. So the idea is to demo the 6. There's 3 storage, water storage containers as well that will be replaced, and the 2 pumps. All of this is to be replaced through the MSBA. What I sent you guys is just the schematic designs. I'm not going to go into detail which each one of them is. If you have any questions, just please let me know. But the boilers are getting replaced in the same spot. Air intake is going to come out where that stack is now. If you guys are familiar with the high school, right near the loading dock, there's a huge stack that goes all the way up. They're taking that down. So I believe that's either the exhaust or the intake. So 6 pipes will go out through that hole that's already there. And then we have louvers that aren't really working. So the idea is just to put another 6 pipes out those louvers, shut them, make them that we can open them up in the winter or close them in the winter to let air in and out. The high school is pretty straightforward as far as what we're going to do. So the water tanks, I think, are 10 to 20 years old. Might as well just replace them if we have this opportunity to get reimbursed 71%. It just seems kind of silly to do 6 boilers, but leave everything else the way it is. It's going to run into issues. So like I said, so the boilers, storage tanks, and the 2 pumps are the focus of being replaced. The middle school is a little different.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
the 29% that remains, what is that number going to be?
I wouldn't know until I get the full cost estimate.
No idea?
No, not yet.
Okay, thank you.
I should have it tomorrow, so this is the crunch time. So the OPM and architect have to send everything over to the MSBA by next Tuesday. So we'll get a full package of everything, what it costs, the whole project narrative, everything like that.
Do we have anything in the budget for this?
No. I've talked to Derek Sullivan about it, and once we get the number, and we know exactly what the warrant needs to look like and what number needs to be on the warrant, we can submit that and hopefully get a town vote in the October meeting to cover it, and then the work could be done in the summer.
So timeline is very crucial, as I said last meeting that I had, so we're still right on point, right on target. MSBA should approve it or deny it. I don't see why they would deny it. Approve it right before our town meeting, so it's very close. Middle school's a little different. So high school fully reimbursed at 71.58. Middle school's the same, but the middle school's tricky. There's different sections of that roof that won't qualify, that do not hit the MSBA eligibility, meaning they're younger than 29 years old. So if they're older than that, those are the ones to be replaced. So if you have the sheet in front of you, A2 is it shows the whole roof layout. So I can tell you which ones will be reimbursed and which ones will not be. And I can tell you which one our problem area is, and was probably the main focus of getting this roof replaced in the first place. What's that? Not really, no. I wish I had way better news. So roof area N, U, and V. If you guys are familiar with how they're actually laid out in the schools, it would be area B, it would be B wing, C wing, and D wing. Those are eligible. Those would be reimbursed to 71.58%. Area A was the renovation that wasn't there with the initial building, so that was in 2004, so that does not qualify. I believe when they did that roof, they also did roof area F. That roof is showing that it's consistent with A, and that is also 2004, which doesn't meet the MSBA requirement for a reimbursement. L is in the same boat. L looks like it's 2004, or definitely younger than 29 years old. I will say that area F is our trouble area. That's the one that we've had multiple leaks in, had to close school down for.
With the seagulls and the quahogs?
Correct. So what's happening up there is that we have roof drains. So where those roof drains are pitched down, there's no reinforcement underneath it. So the PVC membrane is actually lifting from the actual roof. So if you think about it, it's probably harder to penetrate if it was right, it's like glued down. Now that has a little opening, maybe 2-inch gap in between. Seagull drops the shell, rips that thing wide open. And it's pitched down, so all the water goes there. So you're literally just having a puddle right over a hole, and it damages a lot.
Do you have trouble with seagulls and quahogs in Martha's Vineyard in any of your buildings, being an island?
There were roof problems. I don't know if it was because of that. No.
Does F qualify for reimbursement?
Nope.
Oh, F does not either.
No.
Oh,
So
okay.
Once we know the cost estimate, that's the main focus would be to replace this whole roof while we're there. Might as well, because F is definitely what we need. But with that being said, F is going to come out of our pocket at full cost. We can still have the same people work on it, So I believe the cost estimate, when it comes back, there's going to be two options. The base scope, which means pretty much N through V, that is eligible, all those parts, and then there'll be the alternative for the rest. So if you take those two numbers, I believe that's how it's going to be sent to us, take those two numbers, and then we'll take the first number, I should say, the base scope, with the reimbursement of the 71%, take that number after you do the math, and then add it to the alternative. That would be the overall cost that we would have to pay for.
Too bad we can't use all the money we saved on the elementary school.
Seriously, yeah. But that's where we stand so far. So like I said, schematic design is done. Cost estimate should be either, sometimes I get emails around 11 o'clock at night, midnight, regarding the MSBA, so maybe today.
We might still be here.
I won't bring it up if it comes. Yeah. But that's where we stand. So going back to those floor drains, the idea is to lift or put, I guess essentially padding, if you will, underneath to make sure that that membrane won't ever do that again, won't ever peel from the roof. Make sure it's structurally sound all the way through. So big project, and if we do go with it, I was advised too that we're aiming for summer, but this most likely will go into the school year. but the majority and the demo work will be done in the summer. So you'd still have roofers here while kids are in school, but it's not like they're going to be doing the initial ripping, tearing everything apart. Probably someone just going around doing the flashing around the edges and stuff. So I was told just to be prepared and plan accordingly if this all goes well. Any questions? Oh, sorry, I don't want to keep you guys too long.
That was very informative, thank you.
Yep. And like I said, I'm sure next meeting I'll have a lot more information as far as numbers. So, all right,
Okay.
thank you.
Eric.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
Dr. DeAndrea, you're up.
Thank you. Okay, so you have my report, and first we have a gift that I ask that you accept. We received a donation from the Wareham Democratic Town Committee of 18 backpacks with school supplies in them, gifted to the Wareham schools for students in need. And we've reached out to the principals, and they're helping us to identify the 18 students who will receive the backpacks. So very generous gift.
There's nothing on the backpacks that indicates the party that's providing them.
No.
Do I have a motion to accept that gift?
That would be a big problem.
Imagine.
Moved by, who made the motion?
April moved it, I said second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining, 500. Thank you.
Thank you. And second, I ask for your approval of the bill and payroll warrants as listed
So
on my superintendent's newsletter.
April has made the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 500. Thank you.
And that's all I have. I just want to say, after those two reports, we're very fortunate to have both Bonnie and Eric. Technology, when I first started, technology was just kind of something nice to have that might help you with the instruction in your classroom. And now it is, it is built into everything we do, and it is so important that we have folks like that are constantly overseeing the security of it, but also what opportunities we can have for our students with technology. So very important. And then, Eric does a terrific job on keeping on top of the buildings, and our facilities are so important. And they're very complex also. So very important pieces and positions, and two very skilled people. So I think we're fortunate.
Agreed.
That's all I have.
Thank you. Okay, next up, report of the school committee policy subcommittee. April, any update on the policy subcommittee?
Can I just ask something ahead of that?
Sure.
Can I make a motion to table the possible vote and discussion for the protocols to the next meeting in the essence of time?
Well, let's see where we get to by 10 o'clock. And then, because I would like to get over before we have to vote to extend. If that's okay, I mean, we have a motion, someone can second it if you want, we can do that.
I'll defer to the chair.
Let's see if we can get it done tonight. If not, we'll quit at 10.
Okay.
Okay. So we are still looking for the policy subcommittee. We still are in need of a couple participants. I'm still in need of a high school teacher, a high school parent, and a middle school parent to join the policy review subcommittee. So if anyone is interested in being a part of that, please email the principals at your school, or you can reach out to me, and we can get you added. We'd like to hopefully fulfill the last three positions on the committee when we have our first meeting in October.
Thank you. All right, now I'm going to see if we can get record work done in 7 minutes or not. So regarding the draft that we have in front of us, before I have take any motions yet, I'd just like to discuss a couple of things if possible. So Do we have agreement on every item except number 5 right now? Especially if I were to amend number 9 to say uphold, if I take out and support and just say uphold the decision of the majority of the school committee once a decision is made. If I change that, is that acceptable? And does everyone agree with everything else except number 5? Or any questions about anything else besides number 5?
I agree with everything else except 5.
Okay.
As amended with
With that amendment on number 9, okay. So in the interest of time, if I suggested some possible language.
I wrote some, and I wasn't sure if that would be appropriate.
Yeah, I think we'll listen to yours, we'll listen to mine, and we'll
Maybe
see.
combine them together.
We'll see what happens.
So I think if we change the wording, I would feel a little bit better if we said channel requests for district-specific information through the superintendent and/or chair, rather than directly to staff as is appropriate.
Jeff, question?
I just want to know what you mean by district-specific.
Well, everything that people have mentioned was, like, if we were looking for test scores for one particular school or a cohort from one principal, or information regarding retention or anything like that. So that's what I mean, more like district student specific, I would assume, as.
In other words, you're not saying overall district information as compared to an individual school, you're not making that distinction.
No, because it would be to whichever, directly to the staff as it, that's why the as is appropriate. So like, it would be that specific person or that specific school pertaining to whatever question you want to ask, if it's funneled through the chair or the superintendent.
So, and by the way, this is not criticism of the language, I'm just trying to understand it. Give me an example of something where you wouldn't go to the superintendent or the chair.
Like I was stating before, when it would come down to, I'm more like now, obviously like scarred for life from the threat of anything legal, right? So should, in the interest of something happening in the district where I felt that I would need to or would like to speak to, say like the attorney, or to speak to, you know, like if someone came to, if I heard information about some act of impropriety that was either of the chair or of the superintendent, not saying that that would happen, but could, those are clearly questions or things that you don't want to get validation of that information from either of those sources if it's about either of those sources.
So what would your action be then?
To ask, to want to speak to like the attorney, but without
Okay.
having to separate the questions. So that's why I'm saying district specific, because it has to do with so you could say, instead of saying to the superintendent, that's why I said, like, where it says and, like, and or.
So
Because-
I like the and/or, because it does seem to me to cover a situation. I can't imagine a situation where if I couldn't go to the superintendent, I couldn't go to the chair. As long as I had an option other than the
Right,
superintendent.
I just don't know that you need both.
No.
No, I agree with not needing both, I really do.
No,
No, and I'll do and or just say or.
just say or,
But
yeah.
what I'm hearing you say, April, is that there might be a situation where you wouldn't want to go through either one of them.
Well, no, it's not even necessarily that, but it was like, what they had said before is like asking the specific question of like out of, like, just an example, like you reach out and you say, I would like to speak to so-and-so, I want to ask them a question. Well, what is your question? If you don't feel confident in sharing the nature of your question because it could impede something that's going on, you just want to give them the heads up that you want to ask a question of, say, like the attorney or whatever, and just say, out of courtesy, please, I would like to speak to them, I have a question, because it could be clarifying something that then could be brought back up to the chair or the committee as a whole, but you're looking for clarification, and then you're told no.
Because the committee has, I know exactly what you're asking, right? So the committee has a policy that we don't have access to the school attorney.
Absent the
You do.
approval of the chair.
Right. So what I think, what you're proposing is to be able to go around the chair, and tell me if I'm wrong, around the chair to go to the attorney, and that's not possible.
No, only in a specific, like, extreme situation.
But it's just, it's
But not, that's why I'm not saying
That's
that,
not
I'm saying,
possible.
that's what, I'm not saying, I was using it as an example. I'm not saying that's the, yes, I want this to be like my personal connection to the attorney. It's not, I was using that as an example because I wasn't thinking in terms of reaching out and getting MCAS scores. Like, that's not where I've been with any of it, or wasting time of principals to get information. But there's also been instances where people from the district would have wanted to speak to like a school committee person without the, you know what I mean, without having that person like, I'm sorry, I'm not allowed to talk to you without getting permission.
No, but
Kind of.
this is us going to them, not them necessarily coming to us.
Right, but I want to make sure that there's no way to possibly like, because that could be a very blurry line when things go down. Like, it could be, did they come to you or did you go to them? Did you seek out this information or was it brought to your attention?
Well, that is another reason why I think that, you know, the superintendent is asking us to go through him or the chair, because then the information is accurate and correct.
Which I understand, but that's why I just want the language of this bulleted item to be different than channel request for information through the superintendent and the chair.
So what if we just said or?
I would vote for that.
With 45 seconds to go. We're running
I
the
would
edge.
vote for this, but
I'll
I would
make a,
also vote
I'll
for
make a
that.
motion to approve 5, but eliminate and make it or. Now, and if we want to put district-specific, that isn't necessary to me, but to me, the only problem I had with this, especially after talking to Matt privately and discussing it with Kevin, was I wanted to change and or. And that, everything else works for me.
Could you live with that, April, or not? Is that still?
I mean, isn't everything district-specific?
Yeah.
Well, that's why I'm saying, like, that might not be the most important word, I don't know. I'm just still, I think I have to sit with it to know whether I would fully agree as it is with that one in there. Like, I would agree with everything else and wait on 5.
And I
but
don't
I'm
want
still-
to, I don't want to take a vote because the spirit of a norm is that it's accepted by everyone. And it's actually Dorothy, I asked that question of Dorothy and she recommended probably not a vote. It's more of an agreement that we have that we would then sign going forward with that. So it is 10 o'clock. I know we're close, but I feel like we have 9 out of the 10, and we'll discuss the 10th, the number 5 again at our next meeting. And we've waited this long, another 2 weeks isn't going to kill us. So,
And I'm sorry to be sort of like a pain about it, but I just want to be, if I'm signing something, I want to be 100% comfortable with what I'm signing.
No, and I support that too, because I remember what you went through, like, I know why this is so important to you, so we can take the time with it.
And the bottom line is 9 out of 10, we have informally agreed to, and that's positive.
correct. So, okay, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I thought she said so moved. I was like, wait.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
No, not me.
Who made the motion? Jeff made the motion.
I made
April
the
seconded it.
motion. April seconded it.
And it was 500. Meeting is adjourned.